teoricamente, a gente tá... In theory, we're live.
In theory.
Yeah.
Okay.
But let's wait a couple minutes until everyone start.
Pop up.
Yeah.
Because we're late and they were waiting.
Probably, yeah. We will see like people coming in real quick. Okay. People are gonna start chatting. Hey guys. E agora, estão ouvindo? Agora foi, beleza. Agora foi. O bom de ter isso aqui, I can know if we're like, I can hear us. Okay. We're good. Pessoal, hoje é o primeiro episódio do podcast do Sargento. Vou começar a falar inglês porque o Justin é americano. E você, do pessoal que manja dos inglês aí, desenrola o inglês. Se você não souber, mano, depois vai ter o vídeo. Quando eu subir o vídeo pro YouTube, eu vou colocar subtitle, colocar legenda. Mas a gente vai continuar falando inglês. Bom, a gente tá com mais de 100 pessoas. Justin, thanks so much for coming, bro.
Yeah. Oh, yeah.
Bro, when we talk about it and I talk about like doing this podcast with you, like, it is, I was telling you, for you might not be like, seem like a big deal, but for us who live in Brazil, especially the guys who like the military and stuff like that, having like a Green Beret, Special Force, 20 years in, officer, like this is like, it means a lot to me. Thanks so much for coming.
Yeah. Well, I hope everybody's listening and gets something out of this.
Yeah, me too. Bro, first thing I want you to do, I want you to introduce yourself and like tell like a little bit about yourself and stuff like that.
All the way at the beginning, or you just want
No,
to know
just
the military
just a quick introduction, like.
Yeah, so Justin Bakal, been in 19 years active. I'm not fully at my 20. I'll hit my 20 and retire next year. So I'm originally from Brooklyn, New York. Grew up mostly as a New York kid. Finished high school in New Jersey. Went to college in New Jersey. And I actually did my first enlistment into the reserves while I was in college. So this was pre 9/11. All right, so I'm a bit of an older guy. Right, I'm 41 now, and it was 2000 I started college, and I was looking. I had always wanted to be an Air Force pilot. It was like my first thing. That's what I really wanted, and I got bad vision. Bad vision kind of developed when I was a teenager. I was like, oh no, I'll never be a pilot. You know, this is before anyone was really doing surgeries for your eyes to fix that stuff up. And so I had an opportunity for an Air Force ROTC scholarship, like right away. Did an interview with the colonel in Air Force. He was like, yep, we want to give you a scholarship. You know, but they wanted to lock me into a technical major. And I was like, no, I'm not studying math all through college. That's not my jam, not at all. So I turned it down. Like, you know, basically free college and kind of took the risk. I'll take the loans, you know, pay my way. Went into Army ROTC in college. And I was like, wow, I like this stuff. And, you know, going through the mud, climbing, they're going to teach me how to shoot guns and all this stuff was like really exciting to me.
That's after you gave up the Air Force?
Yeah, I gave up on the Air Force
and then you gave up completely the military at all, and then you heard about the ROTC after, or it was something that was like correlated?
Yeah, I mean, if you ask my parents and my brothers, they'll tell you I was always destined for the military. Like as a kid, I was always playing G.I. Joe games and always, you know, I turned any game I turned into like playing soldier in some way or another, you know. So it was kind of like they would say I was always destined for it, you know.
Okay.
My dad has a great picture up in his office of me as like 5 years old holding one of those little green army men, just like looking out in the window like I'm dreaming.
Okay.
Of,
so
you
have that on your heart since you were a kid.
Yeah.
Okay.
You know, which is weird. You know, my parents are military. My whole family they were basically 1960s era hippies, right? My whole family was at Woodstock in 1969.
Really?
Parents were there.
Okay.
My uncle.
So you didn't have that push from the family.
No, my grandfather. My grandfather was a World War II veteran, though.
Oh, okay.
But that was very far removed from my grandfather, you know, but it was always fascinating to me. You know, he didn't really tell me any war stories. I found him out later in life. I mean, he was in D-Day, he was in Normandy, he was in the Battle of the Bulge. My grandma talked about how
He was in Normandy?
He was in Normandy, yeah. He was in the whole deal invasion,
Really?
and all that. Yeah, yeah.
Did he never told you any stories about that shit?
No. No. He suffered a little bit from, you know, some of that stuff. You call it PTSD. I've got issues with that term in general. We could talk about that later.
Yeah, me
but
too.
he did have episodes of, you know, kind of like getting really scared at night and, you know, kind of freaking out, grabbing his guns. You know, he had a lot of World War II memorabilia.
So he always,
Grandpa would he'd throw on like a Nazi helmet and grab
Really?
his bayonet and run around on the stairs and stuff.
Okay.
You know, just pretty wild if you think about it. But there's no way I can compare my combat experiences to what he
Definitely,
went through in
yeah.
Normandy.
Yeah.
You know, going on the beach. But yeah, he had a lot of cool stuff, and the next generation wasn't about that at all at that time in America in the '60s. You know, my grandfather. So Donald Brownlow was his name, and he was one of the largest collectors of World War II memorabilia,
Okay.
like in the world. When he passed away, a lot of his stuff went to like the British Museum in London and all this stuff. And he was one of the first guys to get into a few like places in Germany.
Okay.
And he got a lot of good collectibles,
Yeah.
let's say, back from the war. And my uncles didn't know all the history behind it, but they would break into his chest and they put on uniforms and play army running around the house. But they were playing the actual, like, you know, hot Nazi officials' uniforms some of these guys are wearing.
So all your military push from the family was like indirect, like was never like something.
Yeah.
Strict.
I was drawn to it, but personally, I think like most people are drawn to it. You know, I think every human out there has some kind of concept in their mind where they want that kind of grand adventure, you know, and depending on where you're from, right, what that means, whether it's military, you know, or some other kind of journey in your life, some adventure, right? I think we all kind of crave that, especially as young men, you know. And when I was brand new in college, 18, 19, that was big for me, you know. I mean, I was like, all right, what's going to be my grand adventure? How am I going to, you know, grow into like the...
What was, there was a specific incident that you say like, you know what, what were you thinking the first time you went to the recruit officer after the Air Force? Because being a pilot, if I don't mistake, you went straight for the
Air Force
after,
scholarship.
were you enlisted or you went as officer?
Yeah, no. So I went enlisted
So,
first while I was in
it's a
college.
huge difference from trying to be a
Yep,
pilot in the
yep,
Air Force
yep,
and
yep.
be enlisted on the Army.
Yeah.
What was the?
Well, my dreams were crushed as a teenager, right? I was like, I'm going to be a fighter pilot. I'm going to fly those jets, shoot those missiles. And then, you know, my vision went bad. It's, okay, so that's not an option. So I had to find a new adventure, a lot of like figuring out who I was, that's hard at 18.
Yeah,
you know, like there's so much you don't know, and you're trying to figure it out in a very difficult time in your life. You know, when you're growing up, you're making these choices that you're not really ready for, you know. But my first year of college, I tried ROTC, and there's no obligation usually when you first start out, right?
So you went to college. You didn't go straight. Like you got you.
College, my freshman year, tried ROTC. I was like, no Air Force. No
So for the guys
scholarship.
at home, tell them what is ROTC.
Yeah, Reserve Officer Training Corps. So that's the if you're not going to like the academy at West Point or something like that.
Okay.
So it's a path to an officer. You can take ROTC, you can do enlisted, and then do Officer Candidate School, OCS, or you can go to the military academy. Those are the three main options if you want to choose the officer route.
If you're coming out on the streets.
Yeah, off the streets. Yeah, I mean, OCS, you can get a contract, and of course, I don't know, I'm not up to date on all the newest recruiting, the exact paths, but I'm speaking 2000, 2002 when I was making a lot of these decisions.
Okay.
I'm sure it's very similar now, but you can make that choice while you've been enlisted for a while. And in fact, I always tell people, if I was to do this all over again, I'm like, get a rewind, redo at 18 years old, I probably would have enlisted first and do like a full 4 year, probably on like a Ranger contract or something like that. go to Ranger Regiment, maybe go to the 82nd, something along those lines, and do 4 years, and work towards NCO, corporal, sergeant, something like that, and then transition over to officer. I think that would have been a little bit healthier for me. It's kind of tough to just go straight into officer when you have that desire to be like a soldier. And as an officer, it's not the same,
And I tell this to people in Brazil all the time, because in Brazil, the army in Brazil is completely different, bro. It's completely different. We have this glamour on officers because I think mostly because they pay. And I tell them, like, guys, here's different. Like, it's like everyone has their job, but being an officer, that means like you're gonna be controlling the battlefield and is different than like what you guys think, what you see in the movies and stuff like that.
Yeah.
And then that was your experience as well.
Yeah, and the glory of the officer, there's really not much. Looking back on my career, like there's a lot more. Like I mean, what is that word to somebody? Glory, right? But like. So many times, whether it's on deployment, in Iraq, something like that, I wanted to be the guy kicking in the door, right? But I wasn't. I was the guy back.
And and it's not even your fault, because even if you want to do, your team would probably not let you do it because you're the most valuable asset on the team. Yeah.
There have been situations in Afghanistan where I ended up in the stack, like clearing, but it was kind of unique situations. Generally, whether in special forces or when I was in the 82nd, in a combat operation, that's not where you want to position yourself usually, because you need to be in control. You've got assets overhead. You're controlling a drone. Maybe you got some other assets, helicopters coming in, and you need that big picture.
Definitely.
You can't be there buried into that room, pieing off corners and all that. Yeah.
So you went to the Army recruiter. So tell us a little bit about your career in the Army. What did you do first, and when you decide to be, from when you started to the moment you decide to become a special force?
Yeah. Okay. So, I was a little foolish in the beginning, right? As you are at 19, right? And I tried ROTC. I'm like, hey, I'm pretty good at this stuff, right? Like, what sounds cool to me? Intelligence, right? Okay. Doing intel sounded so cool. It was like James Bond type stuff. This is what's going on in my head, So I walk in the recruiter's office, and I'm stern. I'm like, hey, I don't care what you have. I'm only doing intel. So you give me an intel job or I'm walking out of here. And I thought I was like, doing the deal. And he gave me a pretty boring job, to be honest. Yeah, it doesn't exist anymore. It was 98 Juliet, non-communications interceptor analyst. Never heard of it. Yeah, so my job was just like listening in on like seeing, monitoring traffic, things like that. That
job switched to the 35 series or the 35
series?
At the time?
They combined it into a couple different things and threw it in. But back then when I was in AIT, there were like all types of the 96 Deltas, which they probably changed something else, which were like imagery guys, and they're looking. We call them squints because they're always like looking at the photos and everything from above, trying to figure out what those things are. There were Morse code operators, which were kind of weird people to us because they would sit in the barracks and talk to each other in Morse code, like did it dot 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 dot
really
dot dot dot. Yeah, like nobody really wanted to talk to them. We always thought they were weird, but kind of a cool skill. I mean, we were all intel soldiers, so we were all kind of weird in general.
Nerds.
Yeah, it was very nerd kind of thing.
Were you a nerd? Were you into computer and stuff like that?
I was always good with computers. Like, I was a good student generally at different times in my life, right? I had like a slump in high school where I cared about getting into trouble a little bit more than I cared about other things. But in college, when I started developing more focus, like I definitely have nerd qualities, and they come out, and then I have kind of jock qualities because I was into all types of sports in high school. So I always think I had a good balance, Yeah.
And about video games, because we, my community in general, like we have like, it's focused on Twitch, and I do like this mentorship with the boys, and I help them like with life stuff. But we play a lot of video games together.
Yeah.
Like, were you
first-person shooters
too? No, first person. There's a game called Escape from Tarkov. It's one of like the most realistic and the hardcore game. You know how, for example, you play every game, you have like on your team, like you have things over the head, so you know that's your thing. On Tarkov, you don't have that. There's no any type of like visual assistance. It's like doing like a
Yeah.
real mission. Like if you shoot your partner, he's gonna die. You know what I mean?
I haven't heard of that one. The big one, really, for the past 10, maybe 15 years now, is Arma 3. And
Arma,
I
yeah.
haven't been playing it a lot, but friends who played it, I've looked over the shoulder and like completely realistic. Like the embedder radios that are on the guys, the proper distance and everything.
I think the Arma they really tried to simulate the military.
Yeah.
And the Tarkov was more like the scenario. It is like apocalyptic Russian invasion. Then we have PMCs right there, and they're trying to get out of there. And then like we have this the gameplay from Tarkov is more smooth than the Arma. The Arma because there's so much stuff like it's very
it's calculating everything.
But Tarkov is the between in Arma and Call of Duty. I feel like they got the best of the both worlds and put it together.
Call of Duty, Rainbow Six, and those things. I've played some of them.
My thing too, bro.
What really turned me off to it was going online and playing against guys, and they just kicked my ass. And it's embarrassing, because especially when they started coming out with you could hear stuff and they could talk shit to you. Is it all right if I'm cursing on the podcast? I figure.
Yeah.
Okay. They could talk shit to you, and here I am just getting smoked by these kids. And they're talking shit. I got you. And they come and they do like the up down thing on you.
Yeah.
And I want to just jump through the screen and yell. I'm like, I am a Green Beret.
I know.
I will kill you in real life.
And that's what happened to me in the Arma. One thing that got me like really out of the Arma was like I was a sergeant in the Arma with the combat deployment and stuff like that. And I want to go in the game, but bro, when I come into the game, bro, the last thing I want is fucking lead a fucking platoon, a freaking mission, a fucking Arma, bro. I don't want to do that shit. And then I would go in and the guys would take so serious, like, oh, you're a private. Dude, shut the fuck up. We're playing video games. Shut up. And then I'm like, fuck, I'm not gonna play with this, bro.
Yeah.
Got all these guys that think they're they're oh, they couldn't make it in the military and they make that the lifestyle in the computer. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I don't want to insult any gamers, but there's so many things.
Oh no, here on
right?
this channel, we insult a lot of people.
Okay,
we
good.
Yeah.
But there's a lot of people that think like that's very close to reality.
I know.
There's so many it's those little things that matter, right? Because when you get shot at and the round goes back and it makes there's like the whiz kind of thing, but it has that snap.
Yeah.
And when that snap, and that around that snap is like the little sonic boom from that bullet, and it's all in 5.56, AK-47s, a little heavier, like PKM round, heavier still, like that changes what you do.
100%, 100%.
Yeah,
and
that's it doesn't change it in a video game, right? You'll still come around that corner.
Exactly. That's what I tell every guy. For example, like on the Tarkov, we have this one of the main place that we go to find other people is a building, right? And there's a dude in the stairs waiting for you with a fucking RPK waiting for you in the door, bro. If that was true, we would be the fuck out of the building and call artillery to fuck everyone in that. We would never go inside the fucking building, bro. Doesn't matter. And then that's what I tell people. Like they ask me, like, "Oh, is this really like reality?" No, bro. If there's someone with a gun inside the building, you will not go inside the building, bro.
Yeah,
it's very unlikely.
Yeah,
and that's the one thing that Tarkov did good for this to try to simulate that feel of like, oh, I cannot die, is because on the other games, if you die, you come back, like you're gonna have all your equipment together. In Tarkov, no, your equipment is very like rare, very scarce. Like all the good guns and stuff like that is very expensive. And if you lose, you lose. You don't have that gear anymore. So you need to be like a little bit like have some resources on the back home so you can buy new gear. So that's we call gear fear. People sometimes they're afraid to get on a fight because they don't want to lose that gear they have. That's one of the things that simulate a little bit that aspect, like, oh, there's a guy inside, I don't want to go in there because he's but after
a little bit of risk.
But after
a
while, like for example, me and the other guys that play with me, we were like high level players. Then you have like $100 million on your stash, you don't give a fuck anymore because like, oh, this guy has a fucking gun pointed at the door. I'm gonna jump and do a 360 and kill him. Even if I die, I have money to buy again. But for the lower player, I see that being a factor, and that's the factor that I didn't see in any other game. Because I tell them, bro, when someone starts shooting at you, you're not putting your face at that door ever. Yeah. And people don't understand that, bro.
But it's, you can compare it a lot to other things in fighting, right? It's one thing if, you can just throw punches without consequence, but knowing that a consequence is there, it's like everyone has a plan until they get hit in the face, right? It's the same kind of thing. Like, hey, you do that. Like, yeah, I know I'm going to pie off that corner, do that. But like, what's the round snaps, and you know, things get loud. It's a very different thing, you know, and it takes a high level of both training and courage, right? Like,
Oh, definitely.
both of those things
Definitely.
are important. So if you don't have that and you think because you can execute a certain move in a video game, like, you're fooling yourself. You're absolutely fooling yourself.
100%.
And let's not even talk about fitness, right? Like, those games, what the people were carrying, being able to switch from one thing to another one,
That's another thing too.
you're going to destroy it. I mean, you know, at my lightest, moving around Afghanistan, I had about 35 pounds,
Yep.
right? That's with plate, 2 radios, you know, just a basic load, about 35 pounds, a little bit of water, stuff like that. All right. And it's like they're on your chest, right? So it compresses your breathing a little bit,
Yeah,
right?
that's what I tell everyone, bro. The game is always, the StarCraft game is always fighting to be realistic, like, as possible.
Mm-hmm.
And one of the updates that they did, they took off this thing, like, now there's weight. Like, if you carry a lot of shit, you guys gonna be fucking, like, he will not be able to move sometimes if you go over, like, certain, and people start complaining, like, what the fuck, I can't carry like 300 million of equipment back home now anymore, bro. That's the reality. You will not be fighting with the 40 kilos in your back, bro. You're not gonna be doing that. Like, yeah, and people don't understand. That's the little nuances that people doesn't think about it, bro. You will not be, just go to the prone and come back up is such a fucking struggle.
Yep.
With the gun, with the vest, with the helmet, radios. If you don't have your equipment tied up, shit's gonna fall everywhere.
Your wire comes out. Yeah, so many factors, right? Yeah, and even the airsoft guys, you know, like, they try and get a little closer, but the weight, you can't even compare it. The fear, there's like no fear. I mean, yeah, they hurt a little, I guess. You know,
my first video on a YouTube channel that becomes like a huge thing was me talking shit about the airsoft
good.
guys.
Hey, airsoft people, stop buying all the good gear. All right, I don't know how many times I went on to, like, Cry Precision. I wanted something, and like, it was sold out right away because they all bought it. Like, I'm in Afghanistan trying to get this delivered through an APO, and it's like it's already sold out right away. Like, I need that. Not you, man.
I know, bro. So you were with the nerds on the Intel.
Yep.
And that's how it goes.
Yeah. So walked in the recruiter. He gave me a job that I ended up not liking, and I realized a lot, like, this is not what I want. Right? Like, I want the adventure. I want to be in the mud, getting dirty, playing with guns, explosives, and all that stuff. So, you know, I spent a couple years with that reserve unit. What was interesting about it is, like, this is pre 9/11 that I go into the recruiter. This is like,
what was it?
2000.
When 2000.
Yep.
Okay.
2000 when I make this. That's my freshman year in college. Okay. So it was like late 2000. I start seeing the recruiter. I sign up, and at the time it was what they called split option. You do your basic training in your first summer, and then you go back to college, you do your semesters, and then the next summer you do AIT.
Oh, really?
So that was the deal then. I'm not sure if they still have it. I hope they do, because it's a good option for college kids, right? So I did that. I did basic training. I got there just before Memorial Day, so May 2001. And then I graduated at the end of August, mid-August. It was about 3 weeks before 9/11. And I'm back in college, and I'm at Seton Hall University in New Jersey, and
in New Jersey,
9/11
right
in New
there?
Jersey, right? So my unit is in New York City.
Okay.
They're in the Bronx, right? So north of Manhattan, and 9/11 happens, right? 8 a.m. I think we did PT that morning or something, and then went back to my dorm room, saw it on TV, went upstairs, and from my dormitory building, I could see the towers burning right there.
You could see it.
I could see it with my own eyes. I see it. And I still have my basic training haircut. Like, I'm bald. Back then, it was, you know, like, it was shaved. I still had some hair to shave, right? And I still had my hair growing in from basic training. And I just look out and I see those towers burning, and I'm like, wow, I just signed up for some shit. All right, let's go, you know? And I ended up getting deployment orders by November from my reserve unit.
Yeah, that was
Right. And a lot of people were, but they wouldn't take me on the deployment because I hadn't done AIT yet. So I was useless to them on a deployment. So I almost deployed right away, you know. I never got deployed, right?
as Intel.
As Intel. But my brother, he enlisted in the Marines at the same time, and he went through Camp Lejeune. He was still in basic training. We went about the same time. But, you know, their boot camp is like 3 months long as opposed to ours was like the 8. So he went from there, didn't go to Afghanistan, but he ended up going to Iraq in the invasion, joining in the invasion. You know, it's like my little brother beat me to the war, and I was always kind of like upset about, you know, and we were very competitive back then, grew up boxing each other and all that stuff.
What's your brother MOS?
He was motor transportation
Okay.
in the Marine. Similar thing. We came from a similar mindset when we were younger, and you know we were like, I don't know about infantry. That doesn't sound like a lot of fun. And then we get in and we start to figure it out. Yeah. And as soon as he showed up to his unit and he was doing truck driver stuff, he was like, oh man, I should have joined infantry. They do all the fun stuff, you know. But he was a saw gunner on one of his trucks during the invasion, so yeah, he got pretty decent experience. And he was, you know, the first one in our family for a couple generations to actually go to a war, you know. That was 03.
I imagine too, bro. I imagine like how the feeling would be, bro. That he making fun of you, like I went.
Yeah,
I bet. No,
especially because I was trying to become an officer.
I know. Yeah.
You know, so I had actually by 2003 I was no longer enlisted. I signed an ROTC contract.
Okay.
And the way that worked was they're going to pay for my last 2 years of college, most of it, right? You know, and the scholarships they've changed a little bit over the years.
That's 2003.
Yeah, 2003. Yeah. 2002, I went to AIT and then, you know, came back and signed the contract. So at that point, I didn't know if I wanted to be infantry or engineer, but I knew I didn't want to do intel anymore. Just like, there's some good stuff there, not for me, right? So I decided, you know, work towards engineer, make that my first choice, okay? You back then, you made your choices, and depending on how well you did in ROTC, a good GPA, your performance in training, right? You'll run squad exercises, which, yeah, in ROTC. They have a summer advanced camp that you go to, and you're actually like maneuvering, shooting blanks, doing, you know, sticks lanes, basically, squad tactical exercises. So they're evaluating your leadership right away, the ability to control a small unit, right? Do all those things. And I scored pretty high on that, better than I did on my GPA and my grades. My physical fitness was great. I would never really max. I would always be like a couple points away from maxing, you know, like basic training. My run was super fat. I was like in the 12s, right? I know there's faster people, but you know.
He's really fast. My best time was 13:20.
That was your best ever? Yeah. I'm these days I'm not even in the 13s anymore.
Right? That was a basic training because they make us run every day.
Yeah, every day. I did my basic training in Missouri, Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. It was hot.
Fuck that. I hate running.
I'm a skinny guy and I still lost a lot of weight. Yep. So I was going for engineers and I got my first choice. In 2004, I graduated and got commissioned. And we have a tradition where the first person to salute you, you give him a silver dollar, right? So, of course, I called my brother, said, hey, Lance Corporal, Marine Lance Corporal, why don't you come over here and salute your big brother, and I'll give you some money for it, you know? So he came in. It's a ceremony, you know. My parents actually pinned my grandfather's second lieutenant bars.
Really?
He wore as, you know, in World War II or maybe after.
That's different. That's different.
Yeah, that was a cool, and they didn't tell me. They just put them on. I was like, wow, there's something different about those, you know? Yeah, which is cool. My grandfather was commissioned as an officer. He was enlisted, but in Normandy at the invasion, a lot of people were killed, and like, hey, we need more officers, and they went from sergeant to lieutenant.
Did you? Right, I'm sure you watch Band of Brothers, and that happens. And that when I saw that, I always wonder if that was a common thing because all the losses we have.
Yeah,
it was a thing that's back in the time.
Yep, and he did intel too, which was very different back then. You know. Because they would go forward a bit. And he grew up in Pennsylvania where everyone spoke German back then. Like Pennsylvania was a very German part of the United States up until very recently. That and parts of Ohio, right? So he could speak German fluently, and he used it all the time out there, you know. He has a few stories about that, you know, kind of like saving him a little bit. But he has tons of stories, and, you know, I won't go down that road too much, but the fact that he was, you know, commissioned as an officer, went enlisted officer during the war was something that was very interesting to me. And I was always fascinated with people who had enlisted time.
I think that's the only time that you can get like a commission like out of there.
Just like, out of nowhere,
Yeah.
kind of like that. Yep, is in extreme situations. Yeah, there's a pretty good book called If You Survive. It was about World War II and covers units that were going through Europe, and it's like you just automatic. If you weren't dying, then you were getting promoted because so many officers,
bet. Yeah.
leading from the front as we train, and a lot of them were killed. Yep.
So you commissioned, and then you went to straight to 82nd.
Yep. 82nd. And I wasn't going to, right? And that's the risk with engineer as an officer.
Kids can go everywhere.
Go construction,
Yeah.
right? Vertical, horizontal. You go to a unit that just makes roads and fixes runways. And, I was a little worried about that. That's the risk. And I got orders to go to 3rd ID and be a construction platoon leader. And I was like, no, this is the worst case scenario. This is the opposite of what I wanted. But when I was in training for Officer Basic back in Missouri, the commander kind of saw that I was motivated. I was volunteering. I was like, I want to go to sapper school. I want to go to pre-ranger so I can go to ranger school, all that. And there was another guy who was like, I want to go to the 82nd, but I don't know, ranger school. I don't know. I just want to go there because like his family was from around here somewhere. And so the commander looked at me, looked at him. I was like, no, you are the type of person the 82nd wants. You can go to 3rd ID and be a construction guy. So he switched my orders, and I got orders to the 82nd. Showed up late 2004, and I was going to go support 3rd Brigade, right? So the 505th. And at the time, the engineers were set up that every platoon is there to be attached to a battalion, right? Kind of similar these days, but basically, you're supporting an infantry battalion. So I was supporting 1505, 1 Panther, and that's who I was
How long
with.
did you stay on the 82nd as engineer?
So right away, you got to go to Ranger School if you don't have it, right? So that was my first thing. Get your tab, because you can't. Hey, I'm an engineer. You're gonna walk into that battalion, and that battalion commander, he's gonna look. You got a Ranger tab? You got a sapper tab? Yeah, maybe. But if you got the Ranger tab, good. You're in the club.
Did you make to Sepper?
No, they wouldn't, because Ranger was a priority. I tried to go a few times, and they were like, no, Ranger school. And then we had, deployment, and it was a very long deployment, and, there was no time for it. Because after deployment, I went through SFAS. And
so you went, you got deployed with the engineers.
Yeah. Sadly, it was just after my platoon leader time. So I did a full year as a platoon leader, right? Training, doing live fires out there at OP-13, which I don't know what it's like now, but back then it was like a trench, plywood, going out, doing live fires, training with the infantry all the time, and then training engineer stuff, right? IEDs were becoming a big thing back then, right? 05, that's the big issue. And my whole platoon had just come back from like the Ramadi, Fallujah area at the time, which is really intimidating, right? Because like Fallujah was a tough fight back then in the beginning of Iraq, So I come back and everybody's 4 aces, right? Double A on both sides. And they look at you as a brand new officer, and it's like, all right, guy, whatever. You got to earn your spot. You work hard, you earn your spot, you earn your respect. You build your credibility, right, as an officer, but also you get out there in the field. You get out there on the range, right? You sleep there in the field. You go through all the stuff that everybody does and still do all the officer side. Make the orders, go to the meetings, all that stuff.
I feel like on a infantry platoon, we are more receptive for a lieutenant that comes with a second lieutenant that comes with a ranger tab. Like I think that's the big like. Okay, if you have a ranger tab, you'll be part of the team. But if you come to an infantry platoon without a ranger tab, bro, you're a little private. That's
And that is a cultural thing, and that's one of the strengths of the 82nd, because I've also worked in 4th ID later on, as special operations liaison to the division, and I saw it's not as strong there. Like there are a lot of lieutenants without ranger tabs there.
And they're fine. They're like.
And I wouldn't say they're fine. Like they're definitely end up lower priority, but it's not like in the 82nd. Like that was a death sentence. You don't pass ranger school, you're going nowhere. That was the mentality.
Although I had my when I was in DECO, we're mounted, and then I had a platoon leader that just come out of whatever you guys do before become officer, and he didn't have a ranger tab. Um, but he was one of the by the end of his term when he left, we really respect him because he really worked for us.
And I'm not a Ranger snob by any means, right? Like there are a lot of reasons that people don't go or don't pass. And a lot of special forces officers, some of the best I've ever worked with, never went to Ranger school, right? Some of them went and like got injured and there was no time to go back because there was like a deployment. Like, it's not like you're not a man if you don't have a Ranger tab, but it says like, hey, I'm at least this good, it's like a
I don't know, like when that's another thing too. When I first have contact with when I finished SFS and I was the course and we have contact with the cadre, we didn't have like all the like the completely idea of like why we have quad cadres there and stuff like that. And then after we realized like, oh, cadres are sent to the SWIC. Sometimes not because they're like really good at their job, but sometimes people are trying to get rid of them and stuff like that. Yeah. But one of the cadres, one of the main guys that was with my guys, the same group of people that I went there, he would always tell something like, oh, if you get your long tab, you don't need your ranger tab because it's like you're graduating college and now you're going back to high school or something like that. Is that a cultural like thing on the SF or?
Yeah, the ranger tab is always going to be important, especially among officers, right? Because it's not like a rite of passage thing. There's a lot of reasons. But I think in special operations, the further you go, you've gone through so much already to prove yourself that like, okay. The Ranger tab is whatever. But it's a credibility thing throughout the community, right? So in special operations, you're very often working with people who are not in special operations. They're going to judge you by that, right? If you're working, as a major in special forces, constantly working with general officers in the conventional side Army, they may have their own impression of Green Berets, but they know for sure what the Ranger tab means. So if you're one and not the other, they may judge you on that. It all depends, culture, personality, But I do think that it's a young man's game, right? Going to Ranger school. I saw some guys go through in their 30s, but it's pretty tough. It's an injury prevention game that works out a lot better in your 20s. And you reach a certain point where it doesn't become as valid, But, I encourage everybody to do it, if for nothing else, for their career, right? Because it'll say a lot about you to people that in a business where people don't have a lot of time to evaluate you, right? Very often judging the book by its cover, right? Because we don't have time to go through all the little details and spend time, right? Hey, there's a deployment coming up. There's a platoon open here. We need a solid guy. We need a solid squad leader, maybe, And like, who does that sergeant major know? He's going to be like, well, there's a ranger. Yeah. So there's so many things. The politics of the military can be really weird.
And I feel like you as an officer have been through, like, you saw way more politics than I did. Because my level, like, is like just a little bit, okay. But on your guys' level, like, I've seen situations that I'm like, holy shit.
Yeah. There's networking, there's some schmoozing, there's a lot of stuff like that. So I don't know if, some of this is going to be rough on your subtitles. My Portuguese isn't great, but it sounded like you were trying to do some subtitles to this.
No,
so.
the YouTube actually do automatic.
They do? Okay, good.
As long as it probably will not translate my English.
Okay.
But your English is going to be translated automatically.
All right,
yeah.
Good. Good. Trying to control what words I use.
So how was war on a conventional army when you went to deploy?
Yeah. Now, joining in with a team of guys who a lot of them were in the invasion and then others were in Fallujah when it was still pretty wild, right? My experience was it was counterinsurgency, right? And that's a very different type of war. When you talk about invasions, maneuvering large bodies of armor, right? Getting your logistics in line as you're going forward, like, that's like the deep science, the deep military science that the Army really trains for. My experience is going straight into counterinsurgency, right? So usually the word war to me, that's what I think of, right? The big maneuver forces. But in counterinsurgency, right, some people call it small wars, whatever, you're dealing with population, and it's usually a population-centric fight, right? It's an information fight. And it's a very hard thing to wrap your head around when you just come in as a lieutenant, thrown into it, you know. But it was also 2006 by the time I actually deployed. And that was just going into the surge, right? The surge ended like 2007 ish. So things were pretty bad. You know, a lot of people were getting killed. The IDs were getting bigger and bigger. You know, I will say that when I was deploying, right, as I was deploying, like I was mentally preparing myself to die or do whatever it takes, right, to be the right leader. Like I set that mentality in myself. Like I'm gonna
Yeah,
do my job.
yeah. I did. I've that's something that's like instilled on us like since
Mm-hmm.
training. You know, like
Mm-hmm.
you you wanna make your guys come back alive.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, through that deployment, really, you know, a few guys got hit with some shrapnel from IEDs and stuff like that. But it was um interestingly enough, the two lieutenants in the company that were either hit bad from IEDs or injured and had to be medevaced, you know, which I think says something about leadership and the culture,
Absolutely, yeah,
especially in the
yeah,
82nd,
yep.
you know. Talk about one guy without sharing his name, but he made a decision when they were doing route clearance when there was an area that was blown up, right? And what the insurgents like to do back then was if you had a chunk of road that was blown up and burnt, they'd come in and like maybe lift one of the blown up pieces and put the IED under there because it was very hard to tell if there was something hidden in that mess of a road. And they went and they had the route clearance vehicle and they were digging around with the robotic arm out of the vehicle and they couldn't see anything, but they couldn't check everything. And he made the choice to get out of that vehicle to make sure it was clear, and it wasn't clear. Took off his legs, and he ended up, you know, getting medevac. He's still fine now, great life, happy family, you know, awesome guy. But you know, he made that choice as a leader, and that's what we do, right? You know, whether it's a team leader, squad leader, platoon leader, you know, that's the mentality that we're trained for and that our culture perpetuates so that, you know, we're making
Definitely,
those right
yeah,
decisions.
yeah. One of I always talk that this in the podcast. People are like, oh, when you get to war, like, were you were you like scared or you want to die or something? Like, bro, the only thing I was scared of was like me doing something fucked up and
Yeah.
get other like from my team killed.
Yeah.
That's the only thing I was worried about.
That's the biggest fear,
Yeah.
right? Because what could be worse than that? You know, when you think about it,
If
like,
something happened, like especially because of my accents, my accent was always something that like make me very very self conscious sometimes. Because imagine if I'm giving an order like, and then they understand and they take like a split a second to do, and then because they didn't understand and something happened and they get killed, like,
yeah,
bro, that would fucking like,
yeah, that's like the worst thing, and that's throughout time. You know, people have always said that kind of stuff. You know, you look at literature throughout time. That's the number one fear of most, right? Especially those who believe in what they're doing, right? If you're kind of conscripted and thrown into a situation you don't believe in, it's kind of a different thing. You know, now you're in a survival mode. But, you know, for those of us who have volunteered to do this and we believe in the cause, the overall cause, right?
Yeah,
Where you fall and what you believe in and what you're doing is something completely different. But
at the end of the day, it doesn't matter. Like if we believe in it, we're there already. So
yeah,
the bigger cause, I don't care. I care like about taking everyone home, so you can talk shit about like the cause, but like we need to go home
yeah,
first, you know.
yeah. And on the cause, you know, and I do want to make this clear, like, this is just me, Justin Bakal, talking and my beliefs, right? Not DOD policy, not, you know, like the Army policy, none of those things. Nobody's telling us like, hey, you have to go, you have to be ready to die, you have to sacrifice yourself at all times. Like, I'm just talking about me and my education and what that's taught me about this. But it is, for me, it was a much more helpful thing to just release and go into my first combat experience without being weighed down with like, am I going to live? Am I going to make it? You know,
Oh, definitely.
focused on the
Yes,
job.
yeah.
Am I going to be a good leader? Right? Am I going to make the right decisions when it counts? That's the stuff that weighs on you. You know, and that's not, you know, like fear, nervousness. You know, saying the word scared, like these are all like weird concepts that blend, right? You know, there weren't really times that I could say, "Oh, I'm scared," you know, but there's an overall fear and nervousness that exists, you know. Before you get on a Black Hawk and go into like a Taliban valley or something like that, you know, there's a nervousness, right? which is based on fear, right? But at none of those times would ever I describe my feeling as like, oh, I'm scared, you know, because
Do you think that that's to do with the training? Because when they ask the question, the question that when I stopped to think about the answer, were you scared, bro? I knew there's the possibility we would die. I knew that like things could go south in a second.
yeah,
But I feel like the training would kick in so hard because we went through so much stuff during the training
Yeah,
that
yeah.
like it is become just your second nature. Like shit can happen, but you're not thinking about that. Of course you're scared. Of course, if you're not scared, you're dumb.
Yeah.
But I feel like we get into this autopilot because all the training we do. Do you feel like
yeah.
you?
Well, I would say if you're not scared, you're dumb. I agree with, but there are some guys that have been through so much that they've numbed out, and it's like an unhealthy level of numbed out. And there are guys who like lose the feeling entirely, and that's an unhealthy thing. And especially in special operations, guys have been through so much. I talked to guys who are like on the battlefield, wounded through the bicep, right, still shooting and not even worried. Or one guy who did a halo jump, right, high altitude, low opening, skydiving, military free fall, and he had a malfunction with his chute, and his adrenaline didn't even spike, because he had dealt with so much. So there are some unhealthy areas of that, but yeah, if you don't have some type of nervousness, something is wrong.
Yeah.
Is what I would say. But it's about like courage. If we were to talk like deep ethics, right? I like studying philosophy stuff, like how Aristotle described it is, it's along a spectrum, right? Like there's cowardice and there's like stupidity on one end, right? And if you're courageous, you're in the middle, right? You're not like crazy disregard everything, because that gets you killed, that gets your men killed too, right? So like courage is finding the right balance of being prudent, thinking about what you're doing, right? Not just jumping into a situation that's dangerous, but also like you're not a coward. So, finding that spot is a big thing. And that's what, these great philosophers would describe as character, right? So the training, absolutely agree, but the training builds the character, right? Your life builds the character, right? You as a fighter, going through all that built your character.
Definitely, yeah.
The ability to step into a cage and fight, step on the mats and fight, right? For a lot of people, they had a rough upbringing and they've developed character through that adversity. So it's the adversity that we get, everything leading up to that point gets us to that almost instinctual decision in the moment.
Have you seen a Green Beret froze? I think that would be unlikely because the type of person we went through selection and all that stuff. The personality, the type of personality that people are looking is not the type that would froze. But I've seen officers in Afghanistan like very, very scared, bro. Like, you could like literally tell this is not good for the troops because this guy is scared. Hide this guy, bro.
I've heard stories, right? I've heard stories of guys like refusing to go out on a mission after one of the guys had gotten shot, right? Not killed, but shot. I've never witnessed it, right? But also, regardless of how many selection processes, filters you go through, there's some people that kind of squeak through a little of that. Some people call it the Swiss cheese, right? If you cut a block of Swiss cheese and there's holes, right, and you put them all, and you got like 10 layers, maybe the holes lined up and someone just drops right through.
Okay.
Yeah. I hate, as a member of the regiment, I don't want to say, there are some Green Berets out there that aren't great, but there are, and we see it. Sometimes you see it on the news, guys get in trouble, do things that are unethical and out of character.
We're going to come back on that because I want to ask about A-team and B teams and stuff like that. But let's come back to your deployment as an engineer.
Yeah.
When you come back from there, that's when you decide to become
well, I decided on special forces kind of.
How did you tell me about how did you decide? What happened?
Well, back up a little bit, right? Because as a 19-year-old walking into the office of the recruiter, if you had told me like, hey, don't even worry about this intel stuff. You're going to be a combat engineer. You're going to lead paratroopers in combat. You're going to become a Green Beret major. Like, if you told me that, I would be like, no way. I wouldn't even believed if you told me I was going to pass Ranger school back then, And maybe that's humility, but like I was like, oh, that's Superman, Green Beret. Like I'm not a Superman.
That's how
You
I feel.
know, I was an average athlete in high school. You know what I mean? Wasn't a college level athlete. Like I just perseverance. Like I learned that my dad's a boxing trainer. Like he taught me. Like you tough it out. You just keep going. You keep going. You get hit. You keep going. You keep going, and that's what matters. So it was always in me to like aspire to those things, but man, I never would have thought looking ahead that I could have made it. And I always tell that to people who are thinking about going in the army, like, don't put a cap on what you can accomplish in the military, right? Because there's a lot of dudes out there, big beach muscle looking dudes, got all the girls, super confident, all these things, and they're missing something, right? And you may have that something. You may be a video game nerd and think, oh man, I couldn't do that. But when you dedicate yourself to it and you're getting in the gym, you're putting on a ruck, you're going out hiking with 50, 60 pounds on your back and going up mountains and building over the years, that's the Green Beret. That's not the guy who's just like, oh, I'm naturally talented. That guy's not going to make it.
Yeah. Oh, yeah, I've seen that like plenty of times.
Yeah.
And I feel like that can be a dream crusher too. Like when you put that rock on your back, bro, and it's a 60-pound rock, and you're in the mile 21.
Oh man, my
and
roommate in college.
You start thinking about like why am I doing that? Like it crosses everyone's mind. Everyone's mind cross like why I'm doing this to myself.
Make you think deeply.
Yes.
My roommate in college, look, to this day, still great friends, right? He shows up, ROTC scholarship. He's like, I'm going to be an infantry officer. This is my dream. I'm going to be an infantry officer, telling everybody too. Nope, infantry for me. The first ruck march we did in ROTC, it was like 40 pounds plus water. And we went like 6 miles. I don't even know. He comes back, he opens a beer and he's like, man, I'm going to be an armor officer.
It happens,
like, no
bro.
way, man.
It happens, bro.
No way.
Especially because like I came with I don't know if I ever told my situation, but I came when I joined the army. I was a green card holder. I couldn't go to SFS. So in the first 3 weeks of base training, after red phase, the SF like recruiter come talk to us, and like me, another British guy, and one French guy, just three foreign. That's the only 3 people they pick from the entire like company. And then I told him like, hey, I can't do it because I'm a green card holder. The British guy too, like, I can do it because I'm a green card holder. And the French, like, I can do it because I'm a green card holder. And like the SF recruiters say like, look, that's a very particular situation. If you 3 of you say that you guys want to do it, I will work your guys' stuff like together. But I need you 3 of you. Say whatever, if you can make it, I will do it. Like in 6 weeks after that, like we got like called that we would just keep training that day, and we would go to a ceremony like with other companies and stuff like that. So they were graduating, and back in the days when you graduate, all the foreign people like the green card holders, they get the citizenship at the graduation, at the base training graduation. They go, they swear the flag, and they do all this stuff, and they get the citizenship. So we got the citizenship like 3 weeks prior to graduating base training, so they could do all the paperwork to send us to airborne school, right? And because of that, I came in with a lot of 18X. And then you see this 18X people that like they are like, oh, I'm gonna be this hua guy. Like I'm like, yeah, I've been training this my entire life. Blah 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 blah. Okay, and then you get in the first one of the things that is like from an 18X perspective, coming out of basic training, going straight to SFS, was we came out of this environment. Everyone's yelling at you like all the time, like do this, do that. Like you have 10 minutes to come to a SFS, like Special Forces assessment selection. Like we're waiting for like the guys start hitting us. That's the only thing that would escalate from what happened in base training, right? And it was not like that. It was just very like, where's your water? Oh, I don't know why is your canteen is empty. Oh, I don't know, Sergeant. What's your number? And walk away. I'm like, bro, that's so like it is. I saw people crushing like, and that would affect their performance. They're really good, but they're like all the little mistakes they did would get in their head, and then their performance would go shit, and then it would not make it. And like, and people that train their entire life for that and wouldn't make it. Yeah.
Resiliency is so important. So important, especially Army. I think more than a lot of other professions or military professions. Army, Marines too, right? Because hey, you're going to be sent somewhere and you may not have toilet paper.
Yep.
You're going to have horrible food and you're just going to deal with it. My first deployment was 16 months.
16 months.
Yeah. So it was about 15, and I ended up volunteering for an extra month to help with the redeployment just because my girlfriend at the time was also in the same position in the unit, and we're like, hey, let's do another month and we'll buy a cruise and go on it together.
Okay.
Relationship went to shit after that, but that's a whole nother story. But so it ended up being like about 16 total months. I mean, I had 2 birthdays while I was over there. Start repeating holidays.
Wait,
again.
after a certain time, them just start getting like paid like twice.
There was, this was a while ago, but I think there was an additional bonus for the extension.
Yeah.
Maybe a couple $100 more or whatever. But I was making so much money because
You're not
I was
spending
spending.
money. Yeah.
I'd moved out of I was, down the street here in an apartment, moved out completely, put it in storage, and then, I was just there. I came back. I bought a Audi S4, the first nice car. It was like, I had made the normal amount of money, but tax free.
That was as SF already, or
no? This is as an engineer. Yeah. No, my longest deployment in SF was 11 months.
11 months.
Yeah, and that was very long. Like that's you're not meeting a lot of SF guys who've done that. Yeah. But that first deployment, 16 months, and we were doing, first it was an infantry mission. We were assigned a section outside of Samara, Iraq. And after a while, they were kind of closing some bases down. And that's when route clearance started to become big. And they wanted us to do the route clearance. So we, as engineers, were like, okay, good. I mean, the infantry mission was so much cooler. Like we were going into houses and, in charge of an area. I was meeting with Iraqi, important members of the community, a lot of the Hajis, right? Those who have been on the pilgrimage, described as the older guys who would come and meet.
Just so I can. That was as an officer on the engineer platoon.
Yep. Officer, engineer platoon. Yep. It was a great experience for me. It was a company in the middle of nowhere, 65 guys, and I was the 2 IC, but I got to do a lot of the important stuff. Right?
So wait, you were a platoon leader or company?
No, I was
company commander.
I was an XO. I was an executive officer of the company.
Oh.
I was just before the deployment was the All-American. We had the division All-American, right? Organizational day. And as a boxer, I'm like, oh yeah, let me join the boxing smoker. Okay, so I make it to the finals. And the finals, all the generals are up front, all the brigade men, and then the lieutenant colonels behind them. And at the time, I was my end of my platoon leader time, and they're like, hey, you're going to be the HHC, the headquarters XO, right? So on the deployment, you're not going to do anything. You're going to be on the big base and be bored forever. And now the colonels and the general and all my, all the battalion commanders, they see me there in the finals, boxing, just brawling it out with this dude in the finals. And I come in and work the next week and like, hey, we've switched you back to the sapper company.
That's good. That's
good. So I got a lot of responsibility, got to be in charge of a whole bunch of stuff going on. A lot of controlling as the platoons were going out, hitting houses and stuff like that, managing the whole thing, mostly from the base, sometimes out there. And, learned a lot, like a lot of responsibility. I was 26 at the time, and second in charge of 65,
How many deploys you had at the time? 2?
That was my first deployment. Yeah. I mean,
I joined the Army, I was 28.
Yeah. It's a growth experience, They say your brain isn't even fully formed until you're like 25, right? My brain's formed. All right, now I'm in charge of a bunch of people in combat. Let's go.
Then you come back from the deployment?
Yep.
And
right to SFAS.
What made you decide to go SFAS?
Yeah. Honestly, I didn't like route clearance. I didn't like going up and down the road waiting for bombs to explode on me. I was like, I'd rather take it to the enemy, right? And also, it seemed like the next thing. Like as an engineer, I looked at my future. Like, okay, less time on the ground, higher rank. Might be in construction, something like that. I'm like, no, I want more of this. The combat experience stuff. I want to be on the ground doing cool stuff. So I put in my packet and was accepted. They don't accept every officer that goes, and they accepted the packet, invited me to selection.
Oh, they do not accept every officer?
No.
That's different.
Some guys have crappy, stuff that they, and they don't want that. I mean,
as I enlisted, you're guaranteed to go. Like there's
Yeah.
your unit. There's no say if you drop a packet.
Yeah.
You're unless
That's
of course
good, I
if you
think.
if you feel the prerequisites like
Yeah.
if you pass the PET test stuff like that, right? Then,
Yep.
But your unit, there's no say like oh you can go. That's the only thing. Doesn't matter what time. For example, if people are trying to escape from GRTC,
Mm-hmm.
they wait to drop the package to selection close to GRTC so they don't go to GRTC.
Yeah, I know it's probably smart, and I don't know what like the SWIC policies are on that, but I do know that there are a lot of good guys out there in units that just bad relationship with their platoon sergeant. Maybe,
Yep.
Right.
Yep.
Maybe they made a mistake, right, and they did something
stigma,
wrong,
yeah.
and they learned from their
Yeah.
mistake, but their unit is holding them down. It could
Definitely.
be tons of things that have happened, and maybe that guy deserves a shot to become a Green Beret.
Definitely.
So
And I've seen this like firsthand too. Like 82nd leadership can be toxic. It can be very toxic. Like especially because as you grow in the ranks, you get the frustration. Like I felt from the platoon's leader, like getting that frustration against the new generation coming in. They're different, like from what the guy are used to. Like they probably went through a lot of shit, and these kids are coming so entitled, and they're not like, you know what I mean. So I feel like I've seen firsthand, and that doesn't mean they don't deserve a shot. That's what I mean. Like,
maybe. I mean, I haven't been in the 82nd in a long time, but I have friends who've been in and out of the 82nd. Like, I can't really say anything bad about the leadership. Like, I mean, even if I could, I wouldn't, I wouldn't agree that the culture and the leadership in the 82nd is toxic, but there are some toxic people.
no.
Like
Yeah.
everywhere.
I'm not generalizing. It's like
Yeah.
I've seen like one.
It exists
yeah,
sometimes, and people are there. And, a lot of it comes down to that character thing.
Exactly.
Some of these leaders, everywhere in the military, they haven't developed their character properly. Maybe they haven't had the right opportunities to develop it, and so you get some guys, and some people become toxic. And
In my experience, completely opposite. Like I always seen these kids like complaining like how the army sucks and stuff like that, because like the toxic leadership that they say like always giving the extra duty and then putting the do shit like that.
hey,
But,
maybe that guy sucks.
And then that's what I'm saying. You see their performance like, bro, you suck. They're gonna pick you. I never had any problem with like very much the opposite. Like I get out of stuff like that would be really bad because like the reputation, like always putting the effort. But it's not a general concept. I'm not generalizing saying that everything's bad. But I'm seeing toxic leadership in person.
Yeah.
Even if the weirdest thing is the guy was super cool to me, and he would like make me favors and like be nice to me and stuff like that. But then I would see the way they would treat like other people. I'm like, bro, you can't be like that, bro. Like fuck this shit. fuck this little private. But
And people have different attitudes towards things, and I don't agree with everybody out there. I don't agree with my own leadership sometimes, but I do believe overall in the systems, right, and a lot of the culture, and the 82nd has an incredible culture, and honestly, I attribute it, most of it, not just because like lineage and second, it's the airborne thing is a huge part of it, right?
Yep.
And if you're volunteering, you're saying I'm going to go to the 82nd, I'm going to be airborne, do all those things, like
something's on you.
you're a driven person, right? And the more driven people you get together and high quality people, like the more you build a culture of people just trying to exceed, become better and better. Some people take a lot of pride in how strict the 82nd is on certain things compared to others. Like, okay, that's cool, but I think the strength of that division is all the incredible people that you get there. They're working together and making each other better.
After throughout the years, I think the second becomes so strong because if you stop to think about all the failures from SFAS and Ranger Regiment, most of them ended up on 82nd, and even though the guy didn't make it, like there's
high quality people, strong desires, ambition. Yep. Yeah, they benefit a lot from that. Which is an advantage. They have guys in the 101st. I've never served in the 101st, but that is a high quality unit with some great culture as well. I mean, even 10th Mountain, right? People love to crack jokes because they live in a place that's no fun, right? Watertown, New York. Nobody wants to live there. But I've developed a little bit of a theory over time. The worse your base is and the worse the place you live, the higher trained the unit is, right?
I guess because
what else are you going to do in Watertown, New York? And you could say that about Fayetteville, North Carolina, too.
True.
This isn't a great place to live. So people are more apt to just train, spend more time at work.
And
get
we
the
were
right thing
we were
done.
with the 10th Mountain in Afghanistan. They were very professional too. Like
Mm.
some units you can see like their lack professionalism, but the people we dealt there, they were like very professional too.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's good units all over the Army. It's it's not just the light units. I mean, even in 4th ID, I was very impressed with.
Did you ever had a problem with subordinated that would not?
A subordinate?
Yeah.
Yeah, I've had issues, discipline issues. A couple of guys that were using drugs and popped hot on the urinalysis, and I mean that's an automatic, right?
Yeah,
It's
there's-
like
there's out of
no
your
no
hand.
brain
There's out of your
applied
hand.
there, right? Like, hey, you're done, man.
But that's the extreme case. I mean, some like more subtle, like more like someone that I don't know have a beef with you personally and would not follow your orders or would like, always contest your orders.
Right.
And,
Never anyone who would contest or not follow the orders, right? And that's another one. That's pretty easy. Like, okay, bam, that's UCMJ. Congratulations. You've chosen yourself, to not have a career here. But, there are definitely times when things are really tense, and guys are kind of like, I mean, that time in Iraq, it was rough, you know what I mean? Like people were dying from IEDs all the time. We were taking a lot of casualties. I remember the wall, my brigade, I think we had 4 pictures up from KIA, throughout that 6 months in a brigade. I mean, it was not easy. A lot of people, didn't think well of the decision and the government. There's like, what's our purpose here kind of thing. So there was some of that I dealt with.
how that's a good thing too, because all my deployments were never long enough for us to question stuff like that. But
16 months of making questions. some
Yeah,
things.
yeah. Like how as a leader, what strategy do you use to keep your like team motivated? To,
Yeah.
like,
To me, number one thing that motivates good soldiers is pride in your unit, right?
right, that's good.
And that smaller unit means even more, right? Like, hey, which one of these squads is doing the best route clearance? Which squad is finding the most IEDs, right? Like, let's recognize that, right? Let's talk about it in front of the platoon,
To keep the morale up.
Yeah, let's tell the battalion commander, like, hey, this squad, amazing work they've been doing. Come down there, like things like impact awards, stuff like that. I mean, not that common on deployment, but they happen. Given that pride in the unit, right? Like, hey, you guys are doing great, and that's what really matters to a good soldier, right? Like, hey, we are the best platoon, and 2 platoons can be the best platoon, right? First platoon to second platoon, they can both think they're the best, and that's good. That's a good, healthy, competition thing. The higher level thing is always like the purpose. Like, okay, what are we doing here? Because are we looking for weapons of mass destruction? Right? People start asking these things. And again, like I'm not, the missions. I have no point as a lieutenant to be able to comment on any of that. But what I'm telling the guys is like, we're here. We take care of each other in this platoon. We perform. We do what we're told. We do our job, right? And in the higher level, we've all volunteered to be in the United States Army because we believe in America, right? We take that oath, right, that we're defending the Constitution. We're not, the details of that and how policy directs us is up to other people, elected officials, cabinet members that influence those decisions. It's not us that, get to pick and choose that, but we know that whatever those decisions are, the higher purpose, being a defender of the Constitution, means everything, right? And that's what we're doing. We're at that flag on our shoulder. It says U.S. Army on our chest. That's the stuff that really matters, right? Some people respond well to that or motivated by that. Some people are like, "Man, I need to get out."
I understand it. I understand too.
There's a cost, for some people. Hey, I'm willing to do so much, sacrifice so much. And then with families, it makes it even more difficult. Over a year being gone.
Girlfriend's breaking up with him.
Yeah. Your girlfriends don't survive a lot of deployments. Like.
I tell this to the guys all the time. Like every time I got deployed, I would like tell the girls like, "Hey, I'm single. You're single. I don't care. I'm not gonna keep this illusion."
Yeah,
that's the first step for failure. Like if something happened and I'm there, like I'll not be able to focus 100% there.
Yeah, I agree. I've lost some good ones like that too. Yeah, but at the same time,
I have a theory though. Yeah, if you do that, like, oh, you're single, okay, and if she does something, she would have done anyway. You know what I mean?
Yeah, if she violates your trust,
Yeah.
unfaithful, something like that.
You
Yeah,
know?
yeah, I agree.
And then if
It
you
would
say,
happen eventually.
and if you tell her like, oh, I'm single, you're single, I'm single, do whatever you want, I'll
Mhm.
focus on my diploma, and you come back and she didn't do anything, or at least she was good enough to hide, so you don't know. At least me, she cares. You know what I mean? Yeah.
Mm.
You know.
There's a level of caring to
Yeah,
that.
yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I had good experiences and bad experiences, you know, but you gotta pick the right people, man.
Let's talk about SFS. So,
Yeah.
how was your experience in SFS?
Oh man, I didn't think I was gonna make it at
Really?
all. Nope. I mean, I went in completely confident. On the third day, completely busted up my left knee.
PT.
Third day.
PT, first rock.
So I went. They were doing an experimental 14-day version. Okay, it was like squeezed every single event into just 14 days, and it was just nonstop. Like barely any sleep, just go, go, go. And I wonder if I would have done better with like the 21-day system,
100%.
you know,
We
and I
had
could
so
rest.
much free time on the SFS, bro.
Yeah.
Was really weird. Like I wasn't expecting. I was expecting no stop or
Yeah.
back to back, and then we have so much free time.
We had foreign students with us in that SFAS, and they couldn't believe how much free time we had, even on the 14-day course. Yeah, some of these guys were like, what? They're coming in soon, right? There's no way we have 2 hours alone to sleep, you know? And it's like, hey, you know, they're looking for certain things in SFAS that aren't always the same as, you know, other types of
Definitely.
training. My knee was like shot. Like by the fourth day, I could barely bend it at all. And I limped my way through the star course and the ruck and all those things. And like
You made it first try.
Yep, first time. Yeah, officers very rare to get a second chance.
Really?
As an officer, very very rare. You know, like weird circumstance, and I was already a little bit later in my timeline because of my long deployment and stuff like that. So, I made it through, and when they told me, they were calling the numbers and people were leaving the room and all that, right? And like, hey, do we want to leave? Do we want to stay
That
in the
happened to me
room?
too, yeah.
You know, and
I
you
have a
don't
good
know
story.
because I hear they
I have a
switch
good
it up,
story
you
about
know.
it, yeah.
And when, you know, I was in the group that made it, and you don't know, you're looking at the people and like, I don't know, that guy looks kind of tough. Maybe this is the good group, you know. And then they congratulate you that you made it. And it was like one of the thrills of my life. Like, oh,
Yeah.
like, because I was like, if I pass this, I'm making it through everything, you know. Like, little did I know how challenging the Q course is itself, you know. That had its own difficulties for me at certain phases, and some things that were easy, some that wasn't.
And what was the hardest thing you did? You feel like you did
In SFAS?
Yeah.
Just to keep going in the team stuff, you know, team events, and you're carrying all these things that are
you were hard,
ridiculously
too.
heavy. Yeah, and you know, with this knee, I'm like, this knee is just gonna explode or something. I had like fluid was building up on the side, and I had this like bouncing fluid on the left side.
Did you get checked or you man up?
Yeah,
and-
I did.
You did?
No, well, I checked because I was like, you know, is there anything you can do for me? You know, but also it's like, you know, why am I going to hide this? Right? There's not a consequence. They're not looking to see like, oh, this guy's got weak knees. Like, I got weak knees and I can make it through. Okay.
No, I've seen people getting med drop involuntary.
Yeah, no, that's true. I wasn't really worried about that. You know, and there were times when like, hey, you know, what are you gonna do? Like, I guess they wanted to see if I was gonna quit. I just looked that guy in the eyes every time. I was like, keep me in the game. Is there anything you give me? Because I'm not leaving. You know, that's
Get some mentality.
what they want to know. You know, that you're not. You wouldn't quit. You wouldn't quit on yourself. You're not gonna quit on your team. That kind of stuff.
Yep. And what the Q course? You went to the route like straight to the Alpha course.
Yeah, well, so for the officer, you actually go to captain's career course before the whole.
It's like for us, we'll be able to see.
Yeah, basically. And at the time, I was at Fort Benning, the portion I went to. Now they do it at Fort Bragg, and you know, you go through that. It's 5 months, I think, it was back then. And I came in and I started the Q course. So that was about 2009 by the time I went through all that and started the Q course. And small unit tactics, right? They call it tactical skills now. And then some of the other trainings, SEER school. We had some weapons training back then for everybody that we would do at the back end, like a range week, things like that. And for me, the toughest part, small unit tactics. Yeah, I got it. I've done this in real life, right? Yeah, I've called in real medevacs. So I could do this, right? But then Robin Sage, very different, you know. And that was the hardest one for me.
Really?
You know, it's like dealing with that complex environment. There are no, sometimes there are no right answers. There's just like less
Let's see
wrong
how I do,
answers,
yeah.
stuff like that. Very complex, ambiguous situations, and learning to maneuver in that, to play that game. The high level chess of that game was tough. It was a lot tougher than I expected, and about halfway through Robin Sage, I was like, oh, I'm doing so bad.
You did back to back with like one try, or did you get recycle in any
No,
class?
no, I didn't. I was a day one recycle in Ranger School.
Really?
Yeah, but I didn't recycle anything in the Q course.
Okay.
Yeah, I left my my nods on the ground when I was like handing out equipment, and then like we adjusted the patrol base perimeter, and my nods ended up on the outside of it. And the RI walks in, sees my nods night vision. He sees me standing there on the ground. I was like, "Who's this?" And I was like, my heart sank. Boom, sent back to day one, do Ranger School. And I just got my go in the Derby phase too. Rough time. No, Q course went through. Sage was tough, but I made it through. And that was 2010. That time I had gone through everything.
And when you made it to the Q course, where did you go? Where did they send you?
Stuttgart, Germany.
Oh, you went to
10th
Germany.
group. Yep. And I was an XO a little bit, company executive officer. Just
You
for
went
a few
straight to
months.
XO.
Yeah.
That's how I got out of the question. Kev. As a SF, as an officer SF, there's no first lieutenant. There's no PLs.
No, you're straight in there, going to command. Yeah, I mean, the SEALs do that. They'll have like a 2-officer thing in a platoon kind of deal, and like you'll work your way up to it. But like, no, you go right in your detachment commander when you get to that ODA.
Okay.
Yep. And that was just within a few months for me. And I got 2 years as a detachment commander. And like, when I say it was the best 2 years of my life, like it is no exaggerate. Like that is an understatement. That life, being on an ODA, unfortunately you only get 2 years usually as an officer, sometimes less, were just, I mean, it was so much fun.
Why? What was?
I mean, first of all, I was in Stuttgart, Germany, right?
Okay.
Drinking great beer, hanging out, dating European women, figuring out that whole thing. And when I wasn't there, I was working with other European countries. Like, hey, we need someone to go to Poland. There's an exercise going there. Yeah, let's send me. All right, next week, have all your stuff ready. Boom, going to Poland, right? All these different countries. And then on the weekends, like, I'd be deploying so often I had money, and because I wasn't spending it on deployment, I'd come back, and it would be best weekend I ever had was 2010, and FIFA was going on, the World Cup. Germany loses, I think, in the semifinals, man, and everyone was disappointed. This is a Wednesday night, right? Germany loses. Everyone's crying all around Germany,
Nice party.
I don't really care, but whatever, it's fun, But all the wins before that were big parties. I'm like, oh, man, well, no big party for them going to the finals in the World Cup. And my friend in the bar was like, well, it's a party for me because I'm going to Spain on Friday. I'm like, really? Why are you going to Spain? He said, I'm going to the running of the bulls, man. Pamplona running of the bulls is going on. I'm like, what? Are you for real? So that was Wednesday drinking. Thursday, we buy tickets. Friday, I'm in Barcelona, dancing in the club, having an incredible time. By Sunday, we do the running of the bulls. We run from the bulls, do all that stuff. Yep. Make it all the way to the arena. And then that night, Sunday night, is the World Cup. And Spain wins in the last 30 seconds. And we're in Plaza de España in Barcelona, and just the city explodes.
Bah.
I had a 8 a.m. flight that I had to go to, and when I left, the party was still going all around the streets.
That's cool.
And that was my life. I would do that, and then I would come back. And, in SF, you come back. And, all right, time to train, right? I showed up on Monday, ready to train, ready to take care of business, do all the admin, do whatever I needed, right? And get ready for the next deployment. And that was the wild life.
Do you guys get a combat deployment from Germany?
A what deployment?
Combat deployment.
Combat deployment? Yeah, I had a few. So it's hard for me to like count the number of deployments, right? Because some deployments are like a month and a half.
Okay.
My first deployment was, I think I had already taken command of detachment, but they needed like a liaison guy sitting in one of the headquarters in Afghanistan. So I did that for like a month. The paperwork, the orders come up, right? You have a con-op, a concept of the operation needs to get approved so another team can do a mission, and you like brief the general, and not a lot of fun, you know. Then I would come back, and then I did deployment with my team after a few training exercises, stuff like that. You know, I worked with tons of different NATO armies in Europe and then in Afghanistan, you know. My deployment when I was a team leader was 11 months long, but it wasn't all with my ODA. I went there a little before them to get a certain mission set up. So I had already been on the ground like 3 months, I think, by the time my team showed up. And that was like, it was, you know, I expected a lot more action, right? Because like as an engineer, I didn't get to do all like, you know, like we did some infantry stuff, but it wasn't like, you know, it was a lot of being in charge of things, right? And then in Afghanistan, it was a lot of training the Afghan forces. And that was like 95% of our time, right? There's a new unit. We got to get them ready, you know, show them how to defend their area, show them how to do operations. And I was like, man, where's all like the fast roping, coming in, shooting, kicking butt and all that? And it's like that real Green Beret work. It's getting, you know, the indigenous forces to do their thing.
And that's the thing that we heard from day one of selection, like, oh, we're a force multiplier. Like we multiply force. But I think with the name and with the glamour that comes with the green, we always think, okay, we do that, but we also do this stuff. Like,
yeah.
You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It is. And yeah, there are definitely those moments, right? Like once we got that force to a certain level and they could do missions, then we would get them on helicopter assaults and go after targets and those kind of things. But, you know, before that, just a lot of range work. And
galera, a gente tá falando um pouco de missão. Pro pessoal que tá assistindo aí de casa, a gente vai entrar em detalhe nas missões, essas coisas, mas vai ser lá no Instagram, quando a gente for fechar a live, e vai ser somente pros inscritos do Instagram. Tem as 5 primeiras pessoas que forem no Instagram agora, vai conseguir se inscrever por metade do preço. Mas... Pera, deixa eu ver uma coisa. Agora, as 5 primeiras pessoas que foram lá vão conseguir se inscrever por metade do preço. A gente tá lendo o chat, tá? O chat tá aparecendo na tela ali pra gente. A gente tá vendo o chat, então vocês estão mandando mensagem, a gente tá lendo. Depois eu vou abrir um espaço pra eles responder umas perguntas. E depois a gente vai lá pro Instagram. Lá no Instagram, todo mundo que mandar pergunta lá, a gente vai responder. Vai ser mais uma parada de pergunta e resposta. Mas vai ser lá no Instagram, não vai ser aqui. Ou não vai ser nem na Twitch, nem no YouTube. Quando a gente fechar aqui, vai ter uns 20, 25 minutos, a gente vai conversar lá no Instagram. Umas paradas mais sérias, umas paradas mais... vai dar mais uns detalhes da realidade. Mas é só pros inscritos do Instagram. Beleza? I was telling them, like, after we... That's good that you talk about missions a little bit right now, but we're gonna go in depth into missions and stuff like that for the people on Instagram. That's, like, more people and stuff like that. And what was your... As your... How long have you been in Green Beret?
So that was 2010, so it's been
14 years
since I graduated.
Okay. As a 13 in Green Beret, what it is one of the biggest accomplishments you feel like you did as a Green Beret? Like one thing that you did, like I'm really proud of this.
Yeah, leading Green Berets in combat operations by far.
By
like,
far,
nothing comes close. You know?
Yeah.
I mean, the fact that I got to lead paratroopers and then lead Green Berets, like nothing. I mean, you know, being a company commander, being a battalion operations officer, like, you know, you get more and more responsibilities. But there's nothing like that honor of, you know, being in charge of the greatest soldiers on the planet, you know, like trusting me, you know, a guy who at 19, you know, stepping in the recruiter's office, I want to do intel, you know, and then fast forward from that, you know, a decade plus, and like where I am, you know. So yeah, I mean, the honor of that is like,
I don't know if I ever told you this, but like when I decided to join the Army, right? I was a professional fighter in California, and I'm like, the only thing we know about the Army in Brazil, it is the things we see in the movies. And what we see in the movies, Navy SEALs, like, right, stuff like that. So I went to the Army Recruiter Center, and then like, I want to join the Army, but I'm like, okay, cool. What do you do in your life? I'm like, I'm a professional fighter. Oh, did you think about like what do you want to do in the Army? Like, what kind of question is that? Like, I want to be a soldier. I'm like, what do you mean? What I want to do in the Army? It's like there's different jobs and stuff like that. Like, you need to like pick a job, like
Mm.
so you can see if you qualify for it. I'm like, I don't know, bro. Maybe a Navy SEAL, and then and and then he look at me like, you're in the wrong place, bro. I'm like, what do you
Next
mean?
door.
Yeah, you gotta go to the other place. Like you gotta go to the Navy. And I'm like, but why? He said, like, the Navy's the people with the ships and stuff. But I don't like water. I told him, like, I don't like water.
That's what you told him. I don't like water.
Yeah. I'm not a great swimmer. I don't want to do close to
Navy
water.
SEAls would have been a problem.
Yeah. And then he told that, bro, you cannot be a Navy SEAL, but you can be a Ranger, though. I'm like, what is a Ranger? And then he like, at the time, my English was way worse. And then he's like, the best way I can explain the Rangers is the Navy SEAls from the Army. I'm like, okay, sign me up. That's what I'm gonna do.
I disagree with that recruiter.
Yeah.
But,
He would tell anything to me sign up. Yeah, that's the thing.
yeah.
But actually, my recruiter was pretty cool because when he went through the process, he realized I was a green card holder, so he couldn't get any job with the security clearance. So he was very clear to me, saying, like, you cannot be a special force, you cannot be a ranger, you can do anything. The only thing you can do that's going to be in the field that you want is infantry. But I promise you, if you go as infantry and you do your best and prove yourself, they're going to offer you a contract.
Yeah.
Right. And it happened. You know what I mean? Even if he was bullshitting me, like, it happened. In the end of the day, it happened. And then I was like, I have no bad experience with recruiting. People always tell me like bad stories with recruiter. I still friends with my recruiter today. He show up on the stream and then he ask me like how I am and stuff like that. So
yeah. So the Army and Special Forces especially have a tradition of taking in foreigners, immigrants, people just coming in and bringing them in and making them part of the fold. There was actually an act during the Cold War, that was passed by Congress. I don't want to mess up any of the details here, but it basically allowed, special circumstances for those Eastern European and Central Europeans specifically to help in the fight in communism to come in and become citizens, right? If they have that skill set, they make it through the training, become Green Berets, right? And again, I don't remember all the details of it, but we still joke about that a lot in Special Forces, especially 10th Group. We're focused on Europe. Yeah. When we get a guy from Czech Republic or Russia, Ukraine, and it's like he barely speaks English, but he's a great Green Beret, because and we have a tradition of that. It's like, being American, of course, I was blessed to be born here and everything and have all the advantages that come with that. But like, I never looked at an American as like, oh, you're from this land. Like, okay, let's not get into the conversation of who's from this land, right? Like American, that's like a mentality.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of people who were born here that don't have the American mentality,
Yep.
And so I see a lot of stuff where, people are like, oh, like America's for Americans. I'm like, you don't know what you're talking about, bro.
That's another good question. Like how is dealing with a Russian citizen in a special operation community?
Well, I mean, so if you're already there in Special Forces, you're not a Russian citizen anymore.
Yeah, that's true.
You were perhaps born there, yeah. I mean, I've definitely worked with a few guys, especially in 10th Group, who were born in Russia, right, and then moved as adults. Still have a really thick accent, which is fun when they pick up the phone sometimes, and people on the other end are wondering what's going on. But, I've had only great experiences with those guys. I mean, maybe there's a natural suspicion that some people have, like, oh, is he a spy? Like, all right.
Yeah,
like,
I feel like he's normal. I feel, like, especially nowadays, I feel like,
yeah.
But at the same time, I feel like it's normal for us to think like that because we're ingrained by the movies and stuff like that. But if you think about a spy, you would not go to a fucking
I mean, like, I'm no spy expert, but like that seems like a horrible choice, right? Like, what kind of intelligence are you gonna get?
That's what I'm saying. Like,
you're probably gonna get shot before you get any intelligence, right? Anything of value that a good spy. Like, if you had a spy that was so good he become a Green Beret, you probably want him to do something else.
That's true. That's true.
Yeah. But I mean, I always love it, because a lot of times those people who come from other countries are more American than the Americans you grew up with, and so I always liked it.
And now, what's your career going on right now? What do you do now? Tell a little bit like.
I'm an instructor at SWIC, right? So I'm training the incoming officers that are becoming Green Berets. They're going through the qualification course, during MOS phase. I'm a small group instructor, so I get a handful of them, about 12 to 14 a class, and I teach them what it is. I teach them a lot of that character stuff too, ethics. Especially like the ability to make some very tough decisions. Some of the stuff that I struggled through in the Q course, like I said, in Robin Sage, like complex environment, a lot of uncertainty. Like, how do you guide those decisions? What are you drawing on? What information? Where's the development of your character led you to this point that's going to make you a good decision maker in those tough situations? What do you make the kind of decisions where you're going to be able to sleep at night through the rest of your life? Or
that's a good topic for egoism, because I didn't make through Sage. I got dropped before, but one of my friends did it, and he was telling us a scenario that like the officer was presenting like, oh, they need this work with this tribe and everything, and the leader of the tribe really liked them and said, okay, you guys are like part of us. We like you so much that I want to invite you to my wedding. Right, and then like, okay, then the wedding was like with a 12-year-old kid. You know what I mean? Like this kind of situation that would like confront our culture here in the West.
Right.
Have you ever had to deal with some situation
similar
like
stuff? I mean, I'm not. I've heard rumors of situations like that, but it's all along the same brand of things, right? Like, okay, what do you do in that situation? Is there a right answer, right? Is there, and there's a lot of nuance to that, right? And, as an instructor, I'm not going to go into details about like how to make those decisions. That's, you got to show up and go through the Q course to figure that one out. But, that's the kind of world that we work in as Green Berets, right? Some of these guys are going to places in Africa or places in Asia, and the cultures are so different. I mean,
we even have the case, like the real case scenario that the Green Beret that like beat the shit of the cop that was like raping the kid.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
For the guys don't know, like we had this incident with the Green Beret that like they were working with this tribe, whatever, and they were working with the police force at the time, and these police, the chief of police or something like some high level in the police department over there was raping the boys and something like that. And one day, one of those moms come talk to the Americans and say, please make him stop, like he's hurting everyone and stuff like that. And then one of those Green Berets took it to the heart and like fuck him up like bad. He was sent back home and almost get out of the army and stuff like that. It was a bunch of like I don't know
I don't know the details. I never looked into it too much, but I mean, what was interesting to me when that happened is like, okay, that is an ethical dilemma. That's the kind of thing that you're going to have to deal with on a regular basis as a Green Beret, and I don't know right, wrong. Like, I don't even know what ended up happening. I can't remember the details of that.
I don't know
what the Army decided on it, but we have systems for things like that. But I can tell you that you come across a situation like that, like, are you going to be able to sleep at night based on your decision for the rest of your life? And that,
personally, on specific case, personally, I'm you know me a little bit, so I think like I have a strong personality. I wouldn't give a fuck about rank, and like if something that's happening in front of me, like, yeah, bro, like I'd rather go home. And
I know you wouldn't. I definitely believe that. For me, it's so hard to answer that because I wasn't there and I don't know all like the little details. But in general, to me, that's a sleep at night thing, right? PTSD, I don't like the term, and people talk about that a lot, but kind of in the broader level and what they're looking at psychologically is what people are calling moral injury, right? Like, did you see things or do things that damaged you in a way that defies your morals, right? And they're finding more and more that's what people struggle with when it comes to decisions. My personal experience, right? And, I'm still young and haven't had as much time to reflect on this as a lot of older veterans I talk to. My personal experience is that those decisions, more than what you've seen, like horrible, horrific things that you might have seen, those decisions will affect you more throughout your life, right? If you feel like you did the wrong thing, right? Which goes back to what we fear most going into combat, right? It's not letting the guys down to your left and right. I've been in a lot of situations where I've had to make decisions, sometimes for people who are on the ground while I'm in an operations center. It's one of those things that happens as you gain rank. And I do not enjoy doing that at all, but like I've made some decisions that I think were the wrong decision, you know. Luckily nothing that like, you know, was like egregious or anything, never where I made like an incorrect ethical decision, you know, but like you're making decisions that determine if somebody lives or somebody dies on a regular basis from very far away, you know. And those are the kind of things that, you know, I have to play with in my own mind and deal with and figure it out, you know.
Do you consider yourself having do you have PTSD?
No, I really don't. And also, one of the reasons I don't like that is I don't like the disorder part of that, right? A lot of these psychological things, we call it disorder. It's like pointing your finger at someone saying, you're fucked up, man. You're not ready for society anymore, you know. And, you know, the movie Born on the 4th of July with Tom Cruise is something that I saw when I was young, and I was like, oh no, Vietnam vet, they're all screwed up from the horrific things. And there's so many details of that go beyond, you know, we could do a whole separate podcast on this.
I know, yeah.
But the bottom line to me is that, you know, it's Sebastian Junger wrote the book Tribe, and that's a great way of looking at the whole thing. If you still feel accepted by your community when you come home, that's what's most important, you know. And the Israeli army, according to these studies, is really good at this because so many of them are combat veterans and have been through that, and they're under constant attacks, right? There's some type of fight, right? And let's not talk about who's right, who's wrong, but like, you know, you grow up in Israel, like you're going to experience something, a rocket attack in your neighborhood, something like that. And so the community, when you come back as a veteran, really brings you in. The older people are telling you their stories, how they dealt with it, you know. In the United States, you don't always get that depending on where you live.
And not even that, like sometimes like they don't know the full story. Like sometimes like I think if thanks God I never been in a position that did it, like have to make some decision like that. Like everyone that I was under my command, like under my leadership, come back like safe. But I wonder sometimes like if people that, but my mom has no idea what happened in Afghanistan, right? If she knew everything that I see or things that I didn't do to help those people. You know what I mean? Like
that's a tough one,
how
man.
do you think? You know what I mean?
Yeah, no, those are gonna like, you know, that's something that you're gonna deal with. You know, a lot of the older vets, the Vietnam guys that I've known, you know, they always tell you like these things affect you later in life. You know, when you're in your 50s, when you're 60s, like that stuff is gonna kind of resurface. You know, after that first deployment, I went on a cruise with my girlfriend at the time, and it was out of Puerto Rico, and there was this old Puerto Rican guy at our table at dinner, and you know, he talked to us a little bit, and he's like, hey, probably not today, you know, you're drinking your rum, you're having a good time, enjoy it, but someday you're going to feel these things in a different way, and just be careful that you deal with it properly. Don't ignore it, right? Deal with it properly, you know.
Another thing about like as much as we want to deny, like, okay, I feel like I don't have PTSD. Did you have any effect of like? I'm sure you have, like everyone had at some level. What kind of things that you feel like affected you, like from being so much combat and seeing so much like?
Well, you know, I'll say that compared to a lot of Green Berets, my combat experience is light, despite, you know, over 1,200 days deployed to Iraq, Afghanistan, a little bit of Kuwait and stuff like that. A lot of that was doing officer stuff, right? So
but still, though,
not a lot. Yeah, but like, you know, plenty of the guys I've worked with, you know, like are absolute heroes, have done incredible stuff, you know. The NCOs I've worked with, like amazing people, you know. And they have different experiences, man. A lot more time going through the house, you know. Like I've never had that moment of like kicking in the door, seeing the guy trying to kill me and shooting his face off or anything like that, right? And a lot of people I've worked with have, you know. So I don't have that same level of experience with some people that have to deal with that. Okay. But that being said, I don't lose a lot of sleep in specific things, but I do lose sleep, right? And I don't know if that is because of decisions I've made and things like that. Like, you know, that it's going to take therapy probably, you know, like, but I think I'm very healthy mentally, you know. I don't have like dark thoughts that like sometimes I get angry at people when some dark stuff comes up, you know, but like I'm not really suffering at the level that I know a lot of people are, you know. So I've been lucky, but also I think a lot of that comes from my religion, right? and my relationship with God and philosophy, which is kind of one and the same, that I read on these kind of things. I study it, I write about it in some things too. Right. And I pray about it, and that makes you healthier and it makes you more resilient, and some of those people that just turn to the bottle and drink instead of being proactive and dealing with your emotions will suffer more. Right. That's not to accuse anyone or point a finger, but like I personally think that I've developed some pretty healthy ways of dealing with it. Again, probably more stuff will emerge the older I get and the more I understand things that I'll have to deal with then. I don't, regret my overall decisions. I'm glad I had this path. I've gained so much wisdom from it, And if I chose some path and became an accountant or something instead, I wouldn't have all this.
Because that's a point that like comes out like every time I'm streaming or talking to people, they ask a question like, do I have PTSD? The first thing that comes out, like, no, I don't, like, because that's not something that like I'm constantly thinking about, because I feel like I did what I have to do, and then I did the best way I could, and now we're here. But after that, one fact that is undeniable for me is like before deployments, before doing what I have to do, I never had problem sleep. I never had a problem like with like literally not being able to go to bed. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And then after that, even though like I wake up in the middle of the night like with my heart pounding and stuff like that, but I don't know what it is. I'm not thinking. Yeah. I'm not specifically thinking about the war. I'm not specifically thinking about like what happened there. It's just like a trouble sleep. And I think we talk about this at the gym. It's just something new. It's something that like I never experienced before, and like it is happening now. That he got a 10 weight after the accident too, like on the car. So that might be like a little bit, and then now it's becoming a bigger deal.
Things
like,
building, yeah, it could. I mean, there's so much that we don't know about how the mind works and everything.
Because what we see in the movies, like, is the guy get like the PTSD because they're thinking about the moment, they're thinking about that stuff, and that's not what happened.
Yeah, I don't, it's, I mean, nothing is exactly like the movies, right?
Yeah.
It's especially the aftermath stuff, but there's little nuggets of truth in all those stories that, we see in the movies. Some of them are much smaller nuggets than others, and I always tell people one of the most realistic movies I've ever seen about the military is Jarhead, about the Marines. And it's like a lot of just sitting in the desert using the porta potty, that's a pretty good 90% of what you might be doing. But back to the whole how you deal with stuff. Like I think that we're making some breakthroughs too, like the services for veterans now, as I'm looking to retire, very shortly, like all these things that are available to help deal, and the research and the money that has been going to the right place. Not always, but usually to the right place to help people like us, especially on the back end, that we're making some huge breakthroughs, on the physical and the mental. And I hope there are people out there who, continue to be inspired to like brilliant doctors be like, hey, yeah, here's something that I want to help people with, because, there's a lot, you hear about veteran suicides and all these things,
It's a high number, bro. That 21 number, that 21
yeah.
number,
Yeah, and I don't know exactly how it calculates and how it compares to the regular population, but it's undeniable that it's a problem. Like the scale of the problem is hard to judge, especially at the point we are now, where most of our veterans outside of the global war on terror guys like us, there's a pretty big gap. Some Desert Storm guys, and then Vietnam, and we're losing those guys every day or just passing away. So, we're also losing opportunities for research with those guys that unfortunately didn't get everything that we have these days.
Talking about the war nowadays, like we're getting, as we getting out right now, the United States are most likely in the next 5 years getting a major conflict with all the shit that's going on in Ukraine and Russia. How's your opinion about like what do you think about like what's going on right now, and what do you see in the future? I don't know if you can talk about that.
Yeah, no, I mean, what I always tell people, like, if you actually know what Putin's thinking, like, you're in the wrong place, man, because you should be a billionaire. You should be selling things to the Pentagon, like, you're a genius, because all the military experts out there were all like, oh, Ukraine's going to fall. This is going to happen. And then, look where we are over a year after that.
And that's
So,
another question following that question. Do you think that Russian got embarrassed? Do you think that like
I mean,
from I think you were way better qualified to answer that.
Yeah,
because
I mean,
the technical standpoint, the technical and strategic standpoint. Do you think that we had this idea that Russian is way stronger than it really is? Because they cannot fight a war like in their backyard.
right. Yeah. I mean, I can't say what the higher ups were thinking and what the and what like people were briefing at the highest level.
Yeah.
I have no clue. Right. That's not my realm. Nobody's coming down and like, wait a minute, we need to ask Major Bakal what he thinks about this before we tell the president. Like, no, man. There's plenty of generals that they've got to ask first. But I look at all these kind of decisions where nobody knows, right? Like I had a basic training 3 weeks and I watched the towers get knocked down right in front of me. Like nobody knows what's happening next, and the people who just beware of those guys who are like, oh, there's definitely happened. China's going down, like, okay, how do you know, man?
I know, yeah.
Are you sitting there next to Xi Jinping and like having tea with him and talking about this, or like, yeah. So I don't like to speculate, but to me, it's like always prepare, right? I mean, like, and we're given our directives. We have our chain of command. They say prepare for this, be ready for these contingencies. But then, like at our level, or the level I used to be at, on the ground guy, like you train to the max, to do all those things, and you spend your free time with it, right? You pick up these guns in your free time. You dry fire in your apartment, right? Like I've got my M4 setup, my Glock setup that I love, that I've had for a while, and some nights I'll just dry fire drills, 15 minutes, man. That was always my rule in Afghanistan.
Like once a week at least.
Yeah, yep. Make something better. Like I look at it like a good friend of mine always says, like every day I need to do something that makes me deadly, or I don't feel like it was a good day. And what have I done today to make me deadly? I got better at the Ezekiel choke. I got, I can sweep better. My dry fire is a little bit smoother, every day.
Another question that comes out like constantly, it is, as a 82nd guy, like I could never like get a personalized weapon. Like we have some attachments and stuff like that, but it's pretty standard. And when you go deploy, you say I have my M4, right? As a SF guy, can you deploy with your own, or can you?
No, it's not legal to deploy to a combat zone, to anything. It's official military too. These are like personally owned weapons.
Okay,
that is illegal. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
But I'm sure you guys have more access to
I mean,
attachments, and can you set up your weapons different ways?
Yeah. So you're getting a lot more, cooler stuff, optics, things like that. I mean, for me, I was always an LCAN guy in Afghanistan. Okay. Yeah, the LCAN for me, especially as an officer, I could just flip that switch, and get a better, was it 4x visual, look to the other mountain a little bit more. I also always kept, I had a little mono Zeiss, like mono optic handheld that I had on my kit that I could always grab and
issue.
No, that was personal. Yeah. But like, there were a lot of, spotting scopes, all types of stuff that you could set up. And
can you buy your own scope and put it on your issue weapon?
I don't know. I've seen people do it even in the 82nd before.
As an officer, if you see if I was to see it as an officer or someone I'm in charge of, I would probably tell like, hey, first sergeant, like, let's look into that. Let's make sure this guy isn't going to get himself in trouble with whatever's going on. Let's make sure that we're doing the right thing. Okay.
Fair. I've also seen nonsense, like some soldier wants to put his deer hunting scope on his M4. It's like, that thing is so delicate. It's gonna, you get one jump out of that thing, it's going to be cracked. Like, what are you doing? I had heard about an officer who did that with his M4 deployment.
Really?
Not a good officer amongst other issues the guy had. Yeah. But for special operations, you're getting so much and you have a lot in your budget. Your budget per soldier is so much higher that, you have opportunities to get.
It's because it's so much, it's less, like every team's like 12 guys. So like,
yeah. I mean, you're getting, 12 guys, you got a company, it's got 6 ODAs, right? And you're going to have several 60 millimeter mortars or something like that in the company. It's like, there's a mortar, in some companies, there's probably a mortar for every 6 dudes in the whole company, who knows, whatever your property books have on it. I mean, I know that on deployment we had a 60 millimeter with every truck, right? And we were all trained in direct lay. Like we were all ready to just get out, put that 60 millimeter, use your thumb, right, and then pop rounds on in the next mountain. You know, we trained for that, and we had it like, you know, set up there, velcroed into the side.
That shit's so hard though.
It's hard.
It's
Yeah,
very inaccurate, especially the thumb method.
I never had to use it, right? In training, I like to say I got pretty good. You know, my 6th or 7th round, like it took a little bit, you know. But
yeah, because they teach you is about like
adjusting.
Adjusting.
Yep. But it's also, you know, we didn't have to use it in my detachment at all. But like have had mortars and rockets come around near me, like it's gonna deliver an effect.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
Definitely.
If I start putting rounds onto that mountain and they're there with a Dishka or something like that, like they're gonna have to think about their life decisions real quick.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah. Just another topic that I want to cover with you is about jiu-jitsu. For guys that don't know, Justin is my student. He's been with me in ZR carry since 2nd week, I believe. He's a purple belt for now until sometime.
Sometime is to be determined.
We have a tournament tomorrow too. And tell me about like your you said you started jiu-jitsu with 36.
Yeah.
Tell me like what do you
So I grew up boxing, right? Always felt pretty confident in my hands, even being a little guy, you know. Combatives in the Army, you do a little, you know, combative stuff, and there's some good stuff in there, but you don't get to train it enough to really become proficient, you know, unless you're in a unit, you know, where you got a squared away squad leader who's like, yeah, no, you're going to be good at this. Yeah. I always like to say everyone uses combatives if you're doing a raid, right? If you're going somewhere and there's civilians, you're probably doing some type of combatives, whether it's getting control of them somehow, like moving them when they don't understand the language, you know, so combatives, that kind of stuff is always important. But if you can't shoot, you can't clear rooms, I don't even care what kind of karate chop you can do, or, you know, you can do a flying triangle. Yeah, great. Like, let's learn how to shoot first, right? And then supplement all those skills. But I got into combatives, started doing tournaments, and started like, okay, I need to build up my grappling, because the combatives tournament, the finals.
So it was the combative tournaments that bring you the mentality that you needed to get better.
Yep. It was. And then, you know, I like doing like, you know, Army units hold combative tournaments. They also hold like boxing smokers. Like I said before, I did that in the 82nd. And I did another one. And, you know, I realized as I get older, I probably don't want to, you know, keep getting hit in the head all the time. I saw jiu-jitsu. I was like, oh, I could do this without brain damage. This is great. I'm gonna do this. And it's something that, like, you know, somebody told me like, hey, if you roll like you're 85, you can roll till you're 85 kind of thing. Yeah. And you know me, I don't like to roll like I'm 85. You know, I like to roll like I'm 25, but I'm not. I'm 41. But the idea that I can continue to do a combat sport for most of my life, you know, into my old age, was the most appealing thing to me. And the other thing is to continue to, you know, test my courage, right? Like, I'm not getting out and doing real live missions, getting shot at or anything like that anymore. So like stepping on that mat is the only thing that comes close to that nervousness, the tension, the energy, you know.
Do you still feel that? Yourself. Because for me, like, was a progression. Like, I started doing jiu-jitsu, and I remember being like a little white blue belt, and then like every time we went to a tournament, I would freak the fuck out. That was so tense, and like, so like, oh my gosh, you get out the first fight, your forearm is like burn, you feel like a Hulk, because you move your fingers. And then I went to MMA, and then when you get in the cage, you're so scared. Oh my god, dude. I remember when I throw my first punch on a guy in a fight, on a MMA fight, like I throw like a left cross and a left hook and got right in his eyes and open. And when I saw the blood come down, I'm like, oh my gosh, this guy gonna kill me now. Like, and then like when I come back from jiu-jitsu, I was like, oh, this is just jiu-jitsu, it's not gonna punch me. So it was lighter. And then I went to war, and then when I come back, and then I would start training Muay Thai and stuff like that. Okay, this is just punches. You know what I mean? I feel like it's progressive. For you, when you go to jiu-jitsu tournaments and stuff, you still have that feeling, because I feel like you're very, very calm and very collected the entire time.
It's still there, but it's so much smaller, you know, than like, I mean, you know, there's something that some people have studied in psychology that, like, you don't remember fear and pain as well as you do success and happiness and stuff like that.
That's true.
So, you know, I feel like my memory of those things are a little bit off, but also you get that, you know, I know I was really scared when I was younger and I was doing that stuff. You know, it's like, oh man, this is crazy. I'm gonna go out here and punch this guy in front of hundreds of people.
Yeah.
You know, and even my last big moment doing that was in a fight to win. You know, and there were several hundred people. And it was like packed. You know,
Was that
out the door.
when you did that? You did it for ZR
In
or was
Albuquerque.
Carson?
No,
It was
that was Carlson
Yeah.
Gracie in Albuquerque. Yeah, and
Did you win?
no,
Oh.
the guy went. I don't like researching opponents or anything like that. I'm gonna go in. I'm gonna do my game, and then after he crushed me. It was like
Really?
it was less than 2 minutes, right? And he was a couple weight classes above me, and he was
that's
a
what they
Pan
do
Am
on the-
champ,
okay.
and he was second place open class Pan. You know,
Okay.
like the guy was he was an awesome dude. I still see him all the time out in the big tournaments and stuff like that, and we talk. But yeah, I was in a little over my head, but going out there, like, yeah, you get that feeling, the nervousness, but so much less than before. But like I said, you don't feel it a little bit, maybe there's something wrong. I don't know. I feel like if it goes away, then maybe I'm not that focused. Like for tomorrow's, like I'm not like thinking about it. I'm like, oh man, and I probably won't until I start my warm ups. Somewhere before that, or when I first walk in and I look around, I'm back in the environment. My adrenaline will spike a little bit, but I do like telling that, especially the kids when I'm coaching, like, hey, look, I've been to combat and I still get nervous when I go out in a tournament. It's okay. It's okay to be nervous. The kids look at you a little wild-eyed, like, well, you get nervous? I'm like, yeah, it's okay. Now, it's what you do when you're nervous. If you're nervous and you just clam up and, that's not right. Like getting past that nervousness, and that's part of the courage thing that we develop. That's why it's so much fun to watch these kids go out there, because that gift that they're giving themselves. They are like finding the keys to life out there, 5-6 years old, and you get to see it, and you can't explain to a 5-year-old that he's becoming an expert at life already, and he's so far ahead of the game already that he's learning, finding all the keys. But figure it out.
Guys, eu vou ler as perguntas do chat. Eu vou começar com aquela pergunta ali em cima do combate. Vai mandando algumas perguntas aí que eu vou selecionar as melhores aí e vou traduzir pra ele. The first question, we're gonna open for people in the chat now to send the questions. One of the questions that caught my attention there, like, did you learn any combatives, like any type of like Krav Maga, woohoo shit on the Q course?
So in the Q course, there was some combatives that we did. It was done at a time when it was like a really tough part of the course during the small unit tactics. And we were like really working hard, and it's like, I was like, all right, am I going to fully apply myself to this skill set
Because you
here
wanna
when I
save
have all
energy.
this other
Yeah.
stuff, and there's some energy conservation thing, and I don't know where it is in the course now, but yeah, they do that basic stuff. And I think it's important for everyone to get punched in the face, like it's a life lesson that we all need. And even if, we just got punched as a kid, like as an adult, or periodically, a lot of leaders can develop a little bit better character if they get punched in the face once in a while. But
And I think that's so important because it's especially for me being a professional fighter, like, and knowing that, like, the capability that I have, and I see some scrawny, tiny little bitch thinking he's like the most badass guy in the world just because he has a ring on his chest. It's hard to, like, it's easier to lead your troops when they look at you and they know, like, okay, this guy mean business. You know what I mean?
And you don't need to be the toughest guy on the planet to lead tough men, right?
Yeah.
Like, I've led Green Berets in combat who are way tougher men than me, but like, you earn that credibility and respect by doing those things, right? And also understanding that kind of thing.
Yeah, one thing that I heard, and then it is I took to my life, like, to have a friend and some shit goes down, cannot fight is acceptable.
Mm-hmm.
You cannot fight. I understand that you cannot fight, but will not fight is not acceptable.
Problem.
Yeah,
It's a problem.
Yeah.
Like, who wants those kind of people around them? And there's just natural instincts that we all have, right? Like, whatever humans were before we were driving in cars and stuff like that, when we were on tribes in the Serengeti or whatever, like, that tribe means everything, And I think that's something that we understand better in the military than other people do. But man, I can't imagine having a very fulfilling life if not being a part of a tribe like that who goes through dangers together. You know, um, fighting is close though, right? And those combatives things, to go back to the question, like that mentality goes hand in hand, right? The fighter and the warrior,
Exactly.
it's different, right? If you're a professional fighter, compared to a soldier, it's your cousins, right? You're not the same. There's a little bit more element of sacrifice that warrior soldier is giving. You're still making sacrifices as a pro fighter, right? But it's different, but it's very closely related. And you can kind of develop a lot of those same feelings on a team. You're part of a jiu-jitsu team, you're part of an MMA team, right? You can develop that kind of camaraderie going through those tough times, those dangers, in a way that you're not getting in baseball.
And I feel the aggressivity too, like the aggressivity that's built when you train some combat sports. Like it is you can get that anywhere.
One guy who does some combatives training in course, he says it's inoculation to interpersonal violence, right? It's like getting that shot. You get your vaccine shot to interpersonal violence, and we had a guy who you put the blower suit on when you do the MOUT training, your CQB, the close quarters battle training, and there's a blower suit. You're fully padded, and the idea is that you can get beat up and wailed on, so the guys going through clearing rooms can go hand to hand on you or whatever the situation. And we had one guy who, when I was in the blower suit and I put hands on him, he just that guy ended up refusing to go out on a combat patrol.
He was
once.
one of them. Yeah.
And it was like, I saw it. I saw it when he was scared of that violence. He didn't have the right relationship with.
And
violence.
it's so common. It's so common to get like as these kids. Maybe not on SF, but as a squad leader, as I was when we go to Afghanistan, and I had some kids that like was 19, 20 years old, just got out like high school and getting the army. It's so common for them to not have violence, to not not being around violence. They're like
more and more at younger guys. Yeah, it's crazy. Like, I mean, again, I grew up in Brooklyn. I went. Some of the schools I went to were a lot of kids from housing projects and rough areas and stuff. Like, it's ridiculous to me to think that people can grow up without getting into fights as a kid and going through. I wasn't a great fighter as a kid. I think I was better than most because my dad was a boxing trainer.
And the thing is, like, that's one of the things that sometimes we would do training, bayonet training. Like we do the bayonet landing, like, and I would put these kids to like we would smoke the shit of them and then make them like hit as hard as they can the tires, and then it seems pointless. But my goal is to get you so pissed off that like you bring that fucking violence out and like you discharge on that.
It's in there. It's in there on all of us.
And that's why we'll do tournaments with the like being a black belt allows me to get the kids in the morning like, oh, today we're gonna train jiu-jitsu and now we're gonna do a tournament, and if you're a bitch you're gonna make fun of, and the aggressive will come up because no one will be a bitch. Like they don't want to be a bitch, and because there's no punches and stuff like that would come out like you could see them like trying hard, and that's the I think that's the beauty of the profession, the combative sports that brings. That's the most. It's not about skills because the most is the skills that we learn as a fighter would never be applied on a gunfight situation. I mean, but the aggressivity and the fucking like desire to live. That's like I don't want to lose, and you know what I mean.
It'd be pretty weird if you saw someone doing a De La Hiva.
Yeah, right on a fucking guy with a fucking get inside of a fucking compound and like pull guard. Yeah, that's fucking ridiculous.
I have heard of that not pulling guard, but I do know of a guy who ended up in a knife fight in a house, and he wrapped the guy in guard to get control of him because someone who was supposed to be watching him wasn't, and he charged him and grabbed him.
Oh, really?
And he ended up on his back and got him in a guard to get control of him. Yeah. So it has happened before, like a lot of those skills.
When I first came to North Carolina, because I was a black belt and I started training, back there on the bank hall, we have that thing like we would train jiu-jitsu back there. Me and a couple of the students in the cadre would saw, and then the cadre would start talking and we start training stuff like that. Like they invite me to train like And then I went training Cornerstone. Cornerstone, like the guy
Mhm.
was he's a Green Beret as well. So I've been around like the the cadres and people like that was like a little higher up since I was being private. And I heard stories that like the killing people with knives was very common in the past. Like when you're getting inside the house and people are jumping on you.
So, yeah, I mean, I don't know that we could say it's very common, but it absolutely has happened.
Yeah.
And it's not just not, right? A shovel or whatever,
shovel,
you
yeah.
know, you get a desperate man who thinks that you're the devil and you've
Yeah.
come to, you know, drag him to hell, like literally believes that, you know, like, I mean, there's stories of them throwing their wives at people to, you know, help get away. Like,
no,
you know.
that I saw in person. I saw that like the level of like I don't give a fuck about women is
Yeah.
huge over there because
I'm not smiling because of that. I just thought of an event. You never know what's coming when you go through the door in a house in a different country. We'll talk about it in the next one. We'll talk about some of the stories.
I'm gonna
Like,
make.
I've gone through the door and be like, what is going on?
Oh no, now you're gonna have to tell us because no, don't tell
No,
now.
I'm saving it.
No,
I'm
yeah,
saving
yeah.
it. Yeah.
Rapaziada, estamos aqui no podcast. Daqui uns 20, 25 minutos a gente tá indo pro Instagram. Mas é só pros membros. Eu vou deixar aqui o botão pra você ser membro. Os próximos 5 membros estão com 50% de desconto. Se você quiser ouvir as histórias, a gente vai falar. Agora a gente vai começar a falar de coisa real. A gente começou a falar aqui de entrar na casa e ter que meter a faca nos caras. A gente vai começar a falar de umas paradas mais sérias. Mas é só pro pessoal do Instagram. Vou deixar aí o botão pra você se inscrever. Cola aí. Another thing that I was going to ask you is like, and one of the things that like, two things that like people ask me a lot. The first one, I even make my stream like my moderators and stuff like that. They know that if someone talk about Navy SEAL on my fucking chat, like they get banned, like because the amount of question that I get, like, oh, why don't you become a Navy SEAL? Why don't you try to be a Navy SEAL?
Yeah.
And the other one's about CAG, about like the Delta Force. That's what's your experience and work with? I'm sure we work with the guys at some point in our career.
Yeah. So
And what's the?
Let me start with.
And you can tell us better. What's the main difference between like the two regiments?
Well, so first of all, Navy SEALs, like, you know, these are great Americans, right? These are good dudes. And it's like any unit. Like, you've got a couple who may not be as good as everyone else, right? But, you know, I can tell you with certainty that, like, there are things in the Navy SEAL training with the swimming and all that I didn't have the ability to make it through. I tried to take that route.
Oh, yeah.
You know, something like under the pool, you know, I'm not very good in the water. Part of growing up in New York City, you know, not a lot of pools. We're like, you know, we're playing in the fire hydrant that's spraying us much more than like going into pools. But the SEALs, it's a great community, but it's different culture, right? And probably the reason you get these questions up here like, Navy SEAL, tell me about that. Why didn't you do that? Is because they're very well publicized, right?
Yeah, that's what I told you. I want you to recruit it, and I want to be a Navy SEAL.
And so there was that movie Act of Valor, and it was actual real Navy SEAls. They were in that movie. I knew one of the guys who was in it, and, you know, like their admiral brought him in. It was like, hey, movie, you know, and all that. And even the ones who didn't want to, you know, which is hard to believe a Navy SEAL doesn't want to be in a movie, right? Like, yeah, no, they're out there, you know. A lot of them aren't great, quiet professionals, and that's what they want. But also, because it's very well marketed and advertised, a lot of the people gravitate towards it, and they say, like, well, this is what I want. This is what I know, right? And then people think, like, I want to tell people that I'm a Navy SEAL, right? Go to it as well, right? And I'm not trying to pass judgment. Awesome dudes, you know. I wouldn't make it if I was told to go through BUDS instead of SVS. I know I wouldn't have made this sort of stuff. But
it's so hard, bro.
It attracts that people.
It is so hard. The swimming stuff, like, for me, it is unthinkable, like, to do the fucking thing like in the water, bro.
Yeah.
I
to
think
go underwater for all those
bro,
meters and meters and
not sink. How people, I still up to today do not understand how people not fucking sink in the water, bro.
There are a couple of the drills that I could do okay, you know, like swimming the brick up. It's like some of that stuff I was okay at. But good people though, good people, different mentality, different culture. That's all, you know. I also, you know, in special forces we're more like different missions. Like, we need to be out there with the locals, right? Building good relationships with them, you know, helping them as a people. That, you know, exchanges of, you know, we're training you, you're oppressed, we're going to help free you, all that kind of stuff. You know, and SEALs have more of a kind of like shock troop kind of thing, right? We're going to swim in, we're going to break things, get out. That is an oversimplification. They do so much more than that, right? And it's a very interesting career if that's horse's career is so much. I like foreign cultures. Like I really like being involved in them, learning about them, you know? Like I've drank moonshine type stuff from almost every European culture, man. Whether it's Slivovica, Samagon, like all these strange drinks, all these foods, beaten cow brains, like all type, you know, like I get that because I'm involved in the way the Green Berets are, you know, partner forces. Now on to like, you know, higher level soft units, like it's inevitable, you know, you've been in 13 years in the special operations community, awesome to work with them. You know, guys that make it to those very top levels, whether it's through, you know, like the Army side or the Navy side, you know, they're incredible humans, and like they are beyond a doubt like some of the greatest people walking the planet, right? Have to be, but they're also not really Superman. You know? Like a lot of these guys aren't much different. You know, they aren't the greatest athlete you've ever seen. Incredibly dedicated, focused. It's a skill set, you know, that's unique in the world. You know, the guys that can do. Uh, that's probably all I want to say about that. You know, I mean, I definitely know some guys, you know, have done that highest level, and they're always very impressed with me. And I would just say that anybody who's thinking about going into special forces or that stuff, like that out of your head, right? Focus on your job, and then going. You'll see where.
And that's
Great to have dreams, but you know, focus on the job at hand always.
and that's was a reality check for me since day one of base training. Because when I joined the base training, like the only mentality we have was SEALs,
Yeah.
movies.
Yeah, the
You know?
movies, man, they'll mess you up. Like there's nuggets of truth, but
And then I went to basic training and I see these kids around me. I'm like, dude, I'm full of retards around. Like these, I generally thought the first day of basic training, I'm like, basic training must be the most hardcore trainer because you're gonna get these guys
yeah,
and make them become those beasts. Like, bro, this is gonna be amazing. And then the base training by, and like the graduation day, I look around like, bro, these kids are probably more retarded now than it was before. And then because then this SF recruit come talk to us, and then they pull us aside on the graduation day, and then they pull us with other 18X that was come from other companies. And then I look around and say, okay, these people here around me look more like a younger version than the people that we see in the movie. Like I understand now. Like
yeah.
these kids are going to train and going to become those guys in the movie. You know,
Yeah, you
doesn't
can
make
see
sense.
it
Yeah.
Yep.
And then I
Especially
understand.
coming from professional
Yeah.
fighting, you're pretty good at gauging that.
Yeah, and then after that, like that was my first experience, like with people that high caliber. And then when I started training jiu-jitsu, and things I will always be thankful to Coach Charles to open the door to me. And I got to train with Navy SEALs. I got to train with the CAG guys. And one of the biggest thing that always impressed me is how humble they are. Right? All of them, like they were. I don't know if it's because the environment was humbling, because they're like in jiu-jitsu match and they're maybe lower belts, but all the interaction I have with them, like they were very humble. They were very like, very helpful people. They want to like help people succeed and stuff like that. That's one of the main characters. And all of them, we can see like you put like 10 kegs in the room, 10 Navy SEALs. It's a room full of fucking testosterone, like, and they're going for the kill during the rows, but they were very, very humble, and I never had any bad experience as well with them personally. Yeah.
Yep. And that's, you know, and the 82nd is a version of that too, right? Anything we have more and more filters to get there. Swiss cheese has more and more layers.
Yeah.
The higher quality you have, the less likelihood you're going to have somebody who isn't a great human. You know? That is one of the best things about always going for elite is it completely underestimated how important it is to work with good people. You know, how much effect that has on your life, right? You know, you mentioned some leadership, you know, you've had them, like not having assholes in your life is a huge quality of life thing.
Exactly, and that's
Every day I'm happy to go to work because there's all these amazing people. It makes you so much happier than even if you're doing an amazing. Oh, I'm a movie star. Yeah, but look at
what you'll do. Yeah,
I always tell people like I would never change my life to be Brad Pitt or any of these guys. Like women, money, whatever. Like yeah, that's awesome. I'll take it. But I would never switch lives because Brad Pitt never got to be a Green Beret. And like never got to be a paratrooper, never got to serve in combat with great men, great women. Bro, too.
I remember the speech that the recruiter told us, and what got me, I will never forget that phrase. He was like in a 30-minute speech, right, like telling us about all the MOSs and stuff like that. And then he said, "Bro, let me tell you these guys. That's the only thing I remember from that fucking entire meeting. Is like they make movies about us. They make like songs about us. They make like toys about us. They make games. They make video games about us.
Games.
You know what I mean?
And there's no, in New York City, I've got cousins, they were wealth management guys making big money and stock market dudes. And, I always tell them, it's like, hey, you don't have any video games. Nobody's trying to be you. You may be rich, but nobody wants to be you, right? There are like Navy SEAL camps people can go to, and you pay them thousands of dollars, and they'll put you through.
I know, bro.
They're just like yell at you, like you suck, do push-ups.
You know something? When I get out of the army, this is one project that I want to bring to Brazil because I will become millionaire if I can build that structure.
Just do it right. Don't just take $1,000 and make them do push-ups in the sand.
Throw them water.
Yeah, but there's nothing for that for business, right?
I know.
Nobody's paying thousands of dollars. Like, hey, can I sit in an office?
I know.
Look at stock tickers.
Yeah. Another question pops up there. Did you ever work with 160 SOAR? SOAR?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So special operations aviation guys are incredible pilots.
Yeah.
They can do all those cool things, like put that Chinook, not even touch the top of the building.
And the people come in.
And you'll hop out into the building and fall from the roof or something. They can do amazing things. But really, the conventional pilots are pretty good too, man. Those big Chinook helicopters, they put us down. In Afghanistan, you get those plateaued kind of farms, like they look like big steps so they could farm on them, those Chinooks, they put it barely getting it. Wow. And those were conventional pilots. But yeah, I've been lucky enough to at least train with pilots from 160. Are incredible.
And the last question before we go to Instagram was, what advice would you give to yourself when you started service in the military?
I mentioned before in the beginning of the stream, looking back, I wish that I did enlisted. Like if I could do it all over again, I would have probably enlisted for 4 or 5 years with a Ranger contract, right? Gone for, do what's RASP now, right? The Ranger Assessment Program, something
RASP,
like that. Yeah. That I would have gone that, try to be in the Ranger Regiment, work my way, become an NCO, get that good leadership experience at a team level type thing. The Ranger Regiment guys are, it's not Green Berets, it's a very different job, but they're still very impressive unit. And they get to do a lot more of that kinetic, getting in the house and do things.
Did you become an NCO as a Intel guy?
No. I was PFC.
PFC.
It was only a couple years and reserves, no active time other than the schools. Yep. Okay. So that's what I would do different. And just, think about whether or not you want to be an officer, and spending time a good unit will make you think about that. And, the money's a little bit better. Yeah. Some people would say it's a lot better, right? I remember when I was in E3, I bought an Xbox and I had no money left. And I bought an Xbox and 2 games and I was broke. That was the end of my pay for the month. But, for money thing, you don't join the military.
I tell this to them all the time, I was lucky enough to be able to get BA because of my son. Mm-hmm. But if I didn't have my son, bro, I would still be leaving the barracks getting $1,200 a month.
It's easy for me to say. I mean, you can go online and look up what a major makes with 19 years in. I make a pretty comfortable salary, so it is easier for me to just say, oh, the money is important. But I mean, I would have given up a pretty good chunk of that money to have the chance to be that number one guy in a stack going into a door.
Do you regret it? Be honest.
I don't think
Not
regret's
regret
the right
is the
word.
word, yeah.
I do wish that I did that path instead. You know,
Looking back nowadays, looking back right now, did you miss the opportunity that use
Yeah.
your authority a little bit to be on that stack?
yeah. I missed an opportunity there that I
Yeah.
could have taken. You know, also I think especially especially in the United States, guys are like, oh man, I need to go to college right away. Like,
Fuck
no, man. Think about doing that after, right? You go in the army and you do a few years in the army, and then you go to college. You are the man. But you got money, you got stories,
You
you
go
got
to college for free.
all the girls are coming to talk to you. They're not talking about the guy who just
Yep.
came out of
Yep.
high school and
Yep.
showed up in college, right?
Yep.
They want the guy with the car and the stories and really the character that he's developed
Yep.
there. Like he's became a man.
That's
They
true.
want to talk to the man. They don't want to talk to the high school kid who's figuring it out.
That's true.
Yeah.
Guys, a gente vai cortar por aqui na Twitch e no YouTube. Daqui a gente vai pro Instagram. Mais uma vez aí, mano. Deixa eu ver se já compraram tudo. Tem uma vaga a 50% de desconto e depois é o preço normal. E que também é barato, velho. É 25 reais, pelo amor de Deus, cara. Larga de ser pobre. E agora nós vamos falar. E lá a gente vai falar mais sobre essas missões, sobre entrar na casa e tal, dar os detalhes mais. We're gonna talk a little bit more about, like, now that's gonna talk about the fun stuff. And I'm telling them, like. Vai pro Instagram. A gente vai fechar aqui. Eu vou arrumar o celular. Eu vou deixar tudo pronto. Mas vai pro Instagram. Beleza? Justin, if you wanna say something to your. We're being watching by 114,000
Yeah.
people right now.
Yeah, man. Well, congratulations on 100K subscribers
bro.
and stuff.
Thanks,
man,
man.
this is great.
Yeah.
I think it's awesome. Like, all the subscribers, like it's cool. It says something about you that you're interested in this
Yeah,
stuff.
yeah.
And I hope some of the stuff I talked about is helpful to people.
Oh, definitely.
And I think we should definitely do this again. There's so many other topics.
I
we
know.
could talk
I know.
about,
I've been thinking about. There's so much stuff that I want to ask you too. Like even me. Like, I imagine them. Like, it's a pleasure to have you here, bro.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Yeah. And guys, you are not big. You don't want to social media stuff. You're not big in social
Yeah,
media.
no,
Yeah,
no,
that's
no,
fine. That's
no.
fine.
Later
Yeah.
in life, when I
Yeah.
become a civilian, I'm gonna
Yeah.
need that, but not now.
Yeah, because it's a big platform, so I always like to help people. But yeah, a gente vai fechar aqui. Eu vou ficar aqui 5 minutes, more 5 minutes until I set up everything. If you have any questions, send it right now. He will answer, and then we go to Instagram. Se tiver alguma pergunta, manda agora. A gente vai ficar mais 5 minutos aqui. Manda agora, enquanto eu arrumo o telefone e tudo pra gente ir pro Instagram. Ele vai responder sua pergunta e a gente vai pra lá. Beleza? Deixa eu arrumar. Deixa eu botar. Because the Instagram. What does just consider user for mentally prepared?
Yeah.
How do I prepare myself mentally?
Yeah, no, rock. No, you got it. Rock, and then keep rocking. Now, one thing that you get out of rocking is that it does build a mentality of not quitting, right? You set a goal for yourself and you go. You don't push yourself through an injury when you do it, right? But that's pretty big. I mean, there's no way around that in any type of special operations or almost any type of elite unit, where they're choosing you. Maybe it's just like within your unit, becoming the recon section of a unit and, having Army and Marines. But yeah, rock. Now, mentally, I'm a big fan of fighting, right? Some type of fighting art, where you're actually doing hard sparring is going to build that mentality, right? And not quitting. If you have someone like Professor Eduardo here just smashing you into the mat with his weight and his skill, and you just got to deal with it. That gives you a good not quit kind of attitude, right? You're going tomorrow to a tournament against people my weight. They're not gonna put that pressure on me. So I definitely, even some of the guys who aren't doing well in the Q course, I've had Sergeant Major tell them, like, hey, you probably need to join an MMA gym or something because you got to build up that warrior mentality a little bit. That is a thing to people. That's it. Ruck Rucking and fighting, you can't go wrong.
Rapaziada, quando eu termino de arrumar aqui, eu vou. A gente vai fechar a live. Vou fechar aqui no Instagram, na Twitch e no YouTube. Last question. Do you agree with the laws and the use of carry weapons and also with the power of the police in the USA?
Oh, man.
That's
I'm
that's
in
a
no
weird
position
question.
to comment on any of that.
There's another one there. Is there any other MOS you would recommend for someone thinking about 13 Bravo?
What's 13 Bravo these days? They switched the
13 Bravo, I think he's combat engineer. Or it's 12 Bravo.
12, yeah.
What is 13 Bravo?
Yeah, which Victor, what are you looking to find out? I mean, because it's good to stay in the family of things that you want, hey, I can't do this particular thing, but I could do that with, let's say it's within Intel, maybe I can't be like a human guy, but, I can do some type of other electronic Intel, be within that world. To me, I would always say, okay, so 11 Bravo. And, the mortars guys are always something, being right there. Yeah, I think, I don't know, Eduardo, you probably could say better the guys you work
Stop being a
closest
bitch. Go 11 Bravo. There's nothing better than 11 Bravo. Nothing. Unless you're a little bitch. Then you go and you go
18
something
series
else.
is better, but
But that,
11,
yeah.
11 still pretty
Yeah.
good.
He can't go 18 series because he's Brazilian. So go 11 Bravo first.
Yeah, I think that's the way to go. Like I said, when I first joined, I thought, oh, Intel, that's so cool. And then looking back, one thing that I missed out on as an officer too when I went engineer is that I didn't have an opportunity to join the Ranger Regiment as a platoon leader. So, when you're an infantry officer as a lieutenant, you get that option to go and do some more time in the Ranger Regiment. And that's one slight regret, but I did love being an engineer, so I won't say it was a huge mistake.
Galera, é isso. A gente vai ficar por aqui. É isso, a gente vai ficar por aqui. Se vocês quiserem mais, mano, cola no Instagram, se torna membro lá. E agora a gente vai falar as coisas sérias. Isso aqui tudo foi só uma palhinha pra falar das coisas que importam agora. Valeu, rapaziada, todo mundo que ficou aí. Logo mais vai ter bastante corte no YouTube, vai estar com legenda lá também. E pro pessoal que aí não ficou perdido no inglês. Mas segura aí que vai dar um trabalho do caralho. Agora nós estamos lá pro Instagram. Valeu.